You? What exactly do you want to do? Unaware of the changes happening outside the carriage, Prince Freckles huddled on the seat, looked at Leon across from him with some trepidation, and barked sternly, though lacking confidence. Don't think that just because you're from the cleanup bureau, you can do whatever you want. There is an agreement between the royal family and the cleanup bureau. If you do anything to me, not only will the royal family hold you accountable, but the cleanup bureau will send down an investigator, and then severely punish you. Ah, yes, yes. Not bothered by Joshua's itchy threat-like words, Leon was touching the horn protruding from his cuff link, carefully scanning the surroundings near the king's palace. Looking out through the compartment wall from the carriage, in the sole vision shared by the black ram, clusters of soul flames, in various shades, flickered steadily as usual. Everything seemed normal around the few streets near the king's palace, with no noticeable anomalies. It seems that the rebels were discreet enough not to attract attention. The king's palace remained completely unsuspecting and unguarded, not realizing the actions unfolding on their side. So far, everything was progressing smoothly. Furthermore, more than 100 elite rebels with some military training had successfully infiltrated nearby. Compared to the soul flames of ordinary citizens, the soul flames of these rebels, ready to storm the king's palace, were visibly more lively, bouncing restlessly and excitedly. Although due to patrols and outposts, these people couldn't truly approach the palace, or even enter the square directly facing the palace, and could only stay on the outer streets farther away. Now that the manpower is in place, after glancing at the eager souls and then at the still relaxed king's palace, Leon couldn't help but clench his fist with determination. Everything is set. Next, as long as he successfully infiltrated the king's palace and brought Luke, who could control others' bodies, inside, helping him replace the palace guard captain, these prearranged rebel members could immediately dash across the square and storm the palace. Although more than 100 people seemed too few for such an inside-outside coordination situation, it was more than enough. Forming a line in front of the palace and then charging inside was not a coup but a suicidal rush. Those often executing coups should know that a real armed coup involves a small, elite strike to swiftly control major targets and threatening personnel before anyone has time to react, to complete the task thoroughly. That's the key to success. The difficulty lies in how to avoid troops, hide the small squad effectively, and suddenly attack from a lethal enough distance. After executing the armed assault, suppressing the resistance of hostile forces and stabilizing the situation quickly is what matters, rather than how to break into the palace. These preparations should all be in place before action begins. When it comes time to actually execute, from start to finish, only 1 or 2 hours should be enough. Any longer would mean the operation has failed. After all, people aren't stupid. If you openly gather to assault the palace, even the commander of the capital garrison, no matter how foolish, can't be completely oblivious. Using tricks like digging up roadbeds or blocking streets becomes meaningless against organized military forces, at most slightly delaying them. Getting a 2-hour window would require incredible luck. Considering the distance between the palace and the garrison camp, if they can't make it in an hour and a half, the old king would be furious enough to leap from his wheelchair and strangle the commanding officer himself, followed by whoever put a pig in such an important position. So, we must speed up a bit. After mentally going through the plan and confirming there were no obvious loopholes, Leon released the horn, revealing a gentle smile. Prince Joshua. In the uncertainty and suspicion of Prince Freckles' expression, Leon, always bearing him no goodwill, pointed to their feet in a friendly manner and said, "Your shoelace is untied." Huh? After hearing Leon's words, Prince Freckles was momentarily stunned, then reflexively leaned forward to look at his feet. While he was bent forward, Leon, sitting across, pulled out a small silver hammer with a cushioned end from his cuff link. The Aquarius director's abnormal item holder, Luke, could take over someone else's body with his consciousness once they were unconscious. However, following the routine before his own chief went to the dream realm, he left an abnormal item in the palace that could isolate such abnormal intrusions. Hence, an unconscious person had to carry Luke's consciousness in advance and bring Luke into the palace, giving him the chance to knock out the palace guard captain and assume his identity to redirect the palace guards. Only with the guards mostly redirected could the more than 100 rebels ambushing on the outer streets charge into the palace and seize the old king. As for the unconscious person, who else but Joshua? However, just as Leon was about to swing the little silver hammer to help Prince Freckles take a good nap, for some unknown reason, the carriage they were in suddenly decelerated, followed by a violent tremor. In this abrupt halt, Joshua, who was already leaning forward, was launched from his seat, lunging forward and hitting the empty spot next to Leon, even breaking his nose. Feeling the sharp pain on the bridge of his nose and smelling the blood from his nose, Prince Freckles was just about to burst out in anger when he heard a muffled bang from behind. Surprised by the sound, Joshua turned his head to look, and was horrified to find someone holding the hammer usually used to ring bells in Parliament, slamming it where he had been sitting, leaving a big dent in the soft leather seat. Judging by the swing of the hammer, if not for the sudden stop, this solid swing would have surely hit his head directly. What were you trying to do? Seeing Joshua across, petrified and stammering, Leon couldn't help showing a sheepish expression. Though he had planned the armed coup to send Joshua across the sea to marry a monkey, attempting an assassination, only to be discovered right in front of him was incredibly awkward. Looking at the terrified expression on Joshua's face, Leon pulled the hammer out of the leather seat and said awkwardly, "Do you think my hammer looks nice?" "Of course not. Even a fool could tell you we're planning to hammer me with this thing, right?" Seems there's no way to fool him. Looking at his brother-in-law, who didn't believe a single word or punctuation mark, Leon sighed, grabbed the frantic Joshua trying to open the carriage door, tossed away the little silver hammer, and silently clenched his fist. "Never mind, I've gotten used to it. My luck has always been lousy. Having a plan go smoothly without any hitch would be strange, but missing him with a swing doesn't matter much. Knocking him unconscious works just as well." "Help! Murder!" Joshua, who was assassinated, fortunately managed to twist open the carriage door handle, but his collar was grabbed by Leon from behind. Despite struggling several times, he couldn't break free. In his desperation, he could only struggle tirelessly while shouting for help. The carriage driver, not being deaf, naturally couldn't remain unresponsive to such a racket in the carriage. Hearing the guests' calls for help, he quickly slowed down and stopped. Then he opened the small window between the driver's seat and the carriage, cautiously poking his head in for a look. "Gentlemen, what are you doing?" "Nothing." After covering Joshua's mouth with his hand, Leon replied calmly, looking back. "We're just playing around. You can keep going. What's wrong with your face?" "Huh?" The carriage driver was taken aback by the question, then reached out with a metal hand like a round ball to touch his somewhat rusty face, full of confusion, and said, "Guest, is there something on my face?" "It's not that there's something on your face, it's what are you exactly?" Seeing the metallic head with an eerie shine poking through the little window, and those hollow eyes turned into brown glass, the two people in the carriage couldn't help but gasp in unison. "MMM. MMM." Already startled by Leon's assassination, Prince Freckles was further shocked by the creature poking its head from the window. His fear reached its peak, causing him to go limp and collapse onto the carriage floor, eyes wide with terror at the iron-skinned driver, unable to speak for a while. Though Leon was also startled by the iron-skinned driver, his 2-month journey as a cleaner had significantly trained his psychological resilience. This level of abnormal event was not enough to leave him thunderstruck. After composing himself, Leon first reached out to close the carriage door, then picked up the now limp Joshua and placed him back on the seat opposite, before cautiously asking the carriage driver, "Can you tell me how it feels when you touch your face?" What kind of question is this again? Though puzzled by Leon's question, knowing that the guests he picked up from outside the Parliament building were unlikely ordinary people, the carriage driver replied honestly, "It feels pretty much the same as usual, cold and hard." "Oh, right. My face might have rusted a bit recently. Probably needs a touch of oil." Rusty recently. After hearing this somewhat eerie reply, Leon's eyes narrowed slightly. The driver already considers himself an iron-skinned person rather than a human with soft skin, indicating that his perception has been confused. This means the anomalous object causing his change likely has a relatively high status. Should I touch his face? Deciding temporarily to abandon the idea of knocking Joshua out, Leon hesitated whether to reach out and touch the perplexed iron-skinned head but ultimately gave up on the notion. After all, if the object that turned the driver into an iron-skinned doll spreads through contact, directly touching would be akin to delivering yourself to danger. Without confirming the cause and type of anomalous object, minimizing contact is safer. Indeed, glancing at the iron-skinned driver's face, Leon noticed some reddish-brown rust stains on his neck and under his chin, and nodded kindly. "You've got some rust on you. It definitely needs some maintenance." "Haha, never mind that." After hearing Leon's words, the iron-skinned driver chuckled sincerely. His strange voice with a touch of metallic sound replied, "Maintenance is for esteemed people like you. We just use some canola oil to prevent rust. Besides, with a job that involves exposure to the elements, no matter how much maintenance I do, rust is inevitable." That must be tough. Adhering to the principle of not alerting the other side before confirming the source of anomaly, Leon engaged in light-hearted conversation while holding Joshua's hand to push open the carriage door, then said with a straight face, "Oh, I suddenly remembered something. Could you pause here and wait for me a bit while I check outside?" "Ah, okay." Upon hearing Leon's words, the iron-skinned driver nodded in agreement, then turned his creaking neck as the brown glass eyes fixed intently on the Prince Freckles on the ground. Guessed. With a chin touched with reddish-brown iron rust slightly pulling up, revealing a stiff and dull smile unique to toy dolls. The iron-skinned driver tilted his neck that couldn't turn much due to iron joints, eerily speaking to the terrified Joshua. "Would you like a warm towel?" "Ah." Though appearing human, the iron-skinned driver's actions were just unsettling enough to trigger the uncanny valley effect, shattering Joshua's already fragile psychological defenses. With a scream, Joshua lunged toward the carriage door, tumbling out as he instinctively sought to distance himself from this uncanny carriage. Yet when Joshua got up off the ground, face ghostly pale ready to flee, a mere glance was enough to make him plop back down. The palace, the parade ground, the plaza, the streets, this place he'd seen countless times, now had all sorts of iron-skinned people everywhere. The guards supposed to be holding weapons at the palace gates were replaced with 2 squads of tall black iron-skinned soldiers, their iron-gray thick uniforms becoming truly black-gray iron, now part of their bodies. On the carriage routes outside the palace, steam carriages raced by, yet the horses pulling them had become iron-skin horses with toy-like ball joints. The once smooth movement now became jerky due to the changed joints, and every distance the iron-skin horse reset its limbs, causing the carriage behind to jerk to a halt. Beyond that, the plaza guards, well-dressed nobles, pedestrians on the streets, stray dogs stealing goods, merchants cursing and chasing, all things once alive now transformed into iron-skin dolls. Even though the palace surroundings remained bustling as usual, cold iron gray was visible everywhere, devoid of any warm hue belonging to a body of flesh and blood. This isn't a normal, anomalous object. Squinting into the farther distance, looking at a group of children still transforming into iron-skinned figures at the street's end, Leon couldn't help but take a deep breath. Not only the carriage driver was turned into iron skin, but all living beings in the vicinity, and the effect was expanding continuously. Besides, looking down at his still flesh and blood hands, rubbing them together feeling the cold, hard texture, Leon's brow furrowed deeply. Am I also an iron-skinned person? Leon noticed the same anomaly on his body. After pondering for a moment, he turned back to look in the direction of the palace. Although it's not entirely clear what's going on, it's estimated that over 90% of this anomaly's source is in the palace. As for why he can make such a judgment, let's just say, thankfully, he has a good habit of learning diligently in both his past and present life. Squinting at the distant citizens being transformed, estimating a rough arcuate boundary, Leon took a charcoal pencil from the mirror world, along with a map of the palace vicinity he obtained from the rebels, and drew a half-decent accurate arc on the map. According to the work knowledge taught by Senior Emma, anomalies with such wide-ranging effects generally have two modes of activation. Either everyone who satisfies the conditions is immediately affected, like his heart of ambition, or it spreads outwards in a ring from the center of the anomaly holder. Now, the citizens near the palace have all turned into iron-skinned people, but those further away have not been completely affected, showing a clear sequence. Therefore, it can be determined that the activation mode of this anomaly is the latter. Since the range of the anomaly is known to be a circle, and it is continuously expanding from a certain center, next comes a classic geometric problem. Given an arc of a circle, how do you find the center of the circle? The answer is to make points A and B on the arc, connect AB, draw the perpendicular of AB, then find point C, connect BC, draw the perpendicular of BC, and where these two perpendiculars intersect is the approximate center of the circle. After sketching on the map with the charcoal pencil, seeing the two intersecting perpendiculars converge at the palace, Leon marked a big X on the palace, identifying the approximate location of the iron anomaly. His initial guess was correct. That thing should be inside the palace. It can also largely exclude parts like the Glory Square, the Royal Gallery, the museum, the royal stables, the foreign office area, and all other buildings in the front half of the palace complex, directly locking onto the rear part's sleeping quarters. According to the information he received, the princess should be under house arrest in the sleeping quarters, and it would be best to head over quickly. Moreover, the coup mustn't stop. Looking at the X on the hand-drawn map, Leon stretched his seemingly normal but cold, hard iron hand, immediately deciding to continue his action. Although he doesn't know the effect of this iron anomaly, with his heart of ambition's substitute death ability, the risk of danger is not great. Considering his identity as the leader of the rebels, even if the heart of ambition doesn't activate, he can declare war on the kingdom on the spot, activate the War Cornerstone's combat undying effect, gaining another layer of undying body. If a double-layered undying body still couldn't save him from this sudden iron anomaly, then he might as well admit it was fate. Moreover, even if not considering the possibly dangerous princess, such a good coup opportunity doesn't come often. If the director hadn't received news from the Snow Maiden and discovered that the female reporter following the Aquarius director suspiciously entered the demonic soul abyss, heading to the dream realm to capture her, it would have been difficult to lead the rebels to storm the palace. It's known that the director's hair must be somewhere in the palace. Once the director's slaughter blood hair detects the anomaly's aura approaching, with the director's speed, it's estimated she could be at the palace in less than half a minute. Only with her gone to another world, unable to detect the aura here, can Leon lead the rebel anomaly holders to raid the palace. At any other time, it would have required a sacrifice of lives. So facing this heaven-sent opportunity, whatever the iron anomaly is, it's worth Leon taking a gamble. Guest. Leon, who had lifted up Prince Freckles and gotten back onto the carriage, looked at the iron-skinned coachman whose mouth moved slightly, revealing a simple yet somewhat unsettling smile. Have you finished your business? Yes, it's done. Nodding to the iron-skinned coachman, Leon said, Keep going forward. The palace doesn't allow carriages from outside to enter. Just stop at the registry after passing through the square in front of the palace. This is for the fair. All right. After taking the silver wheel from Leon, the iron-skinned coachman's smile grew more genuine, and the parked carriage started moving forward again with the grating screech of iron horses. It's just that because the joints of the iron horse could never function like real horse joints, the carriage, upon restarting, braked sharply every so often, causing Prince Freckles to turn pale as he huddled on the seat. It seems like that previous emergency brake that let Joshua unexpectedly avoid his hammer strike happened just like this. Understanding the reason, Leon, under Joshua's terrified gaze, pulled out the small silver hammer stuck in the seat, then said with a slightly concerned face, Are you feeling dizzy? Would you like me to help you sleep for a bit? Seeing the small silver hammer in Leon's hand, the already numb Prince Freckles shivered, instinctively wanting to get off and run, but remembering the cold and eerie iron world outside the carriage, he couldn't bring himself to move. Although staying on the carriage might lead to a beating, at least his captor still resembled a human, and considering his status as a prince, it should be, perhaps, unlikely he'd be killed, right? But those creepy iron-skinned people outside he wasn't so sure about. A cleaner might not kill a prince, but those things might not care about his status, so choosing between the two, staying on the carriage to be beaten seemed safer. Could you put away the hammer? Mustering some mental preparation, staring at the shiny hammer in Leon's hand, Prince Freckles wailed. Like before, could you just use your hand? As you wish. Bang! Just as Prince Freckles successfully negotiated some leniency, a piercing racket continuously emerged from the seemingly calm sleeping quarters at the back of the palace building complex, causing the face of the female officer guarding outside to turn pale. Clang! Judging from the sound, it seemed that the desk had been overturned by the princess. Clang! Crashed! That sound, it should be the dismantling of the bed frame, and it's probably completely taken apart. Bang! Squeak! It's over. Most likely the cabinet has been toppled by the princess, cutting the carpet and starting to drag heavily on the floor. What should be done? And as the female officer outside was anxious and pacing, wanting to peek inside but helpless, a series of angry footsteps echoed from the corridor. What's going on? Listening to the constant ruckus from Princess Veronica's bedroom, the queen arrived after being informed, yelling angrily. Is this how you watch over her? Letting her wreak havoc inside like this? Your Majesty! At the queen's scolding, two female officers quickly knelt, and one of them had the courage to reply. The door was locked from the inside by the princess. We don't have the key, and we dare not enter. Useless things. Scowling at the responding female officer, with an air of frenzy, arrogance, and 5 parts of imperiousness, echoing Joshua's demeanor before getting beaten, the queen shouted in anger. Someone, break the door open. I want to see what nonsense she's up to in there. Following the queen's command, 2 guards hurriedly stepped forward and, as ordered, lowered their shoulders and rammed against the locked door. It was unclear whether the strength of the 2 guards was substantial or if there was a problem with the door itself. After just a couple of impacts, the spring mechanism inlaid in the door gave a cracking sound and broke, and the thick, 3-finger-wide door swung open. As the window of Veronica's bedroom faced directly opposite the door, just when the door was knocked open, blinding sunlight streamed through the window and shone directly towards the door, causing those standing in the corridor to instinctively close their eyes. Then, before the queen could open her eyes, a voice suddenly inquired right beside her ear, so close that even the coolness of the other party's breath brushed against the queen's earlobe. Why have you come? Ah! Startled by this near whisper, the queen's exquisitely made-up face abruptly turned pale, and she staggered 2 steps back, during which she stepped on the hem of her bright red dress and almost fell directly onto the floor. Startled to death, looking at her daughter standing by the door with her back to the sunlight, wearing a bizarre smile with a hint of grievance while silently watching her, the queen, still shaken, took a few deep breaths and, thinking she was embarrassed, blushed in anger and furiously scolded. Are you a ghost or something? Can't you make any sound when you walk? I'm sorry. Faced with the queen's scolding, Princess Veronica lowered her head and apologetically said, I startled you. I'll be careful next time. Seeing that the princess did not retort as usual, nor did she make any teasing remarks with a smirk, but instead apologized compliantly, the queen standing outside the door was momentarily taken aback and felt a bit out of place. Her lips parted slightly for a moment. Once she realized, she nodded blankly, subconsciously responding with a hum, and then looked at the princess across from her with some bewilderment. Strange, why didn't she retort this time? Could it be that this confinement has made her docile? Or has she finally accepted her fate, given up the idea of contending with my Joshua for the throne, and is now trying to curry favor with me for a better life once she's married off? But if she's trying to appease me, shouldn't she stay quietly indoors? Why make such a racket smashing things? Unable to figure out what exactly this stepdaughter of hers intended, the queen, after pushing her way into the bedroom and seeing the furniture fragments scattered around, decided to drop her pretense, and relying on her superior status, directly admonished. Don't think you can sweet-talk your way out of trouble. Why are you smashing things? Are you discontent with my and your father's decision? I wouldn't dare. Upon hearing the queen's question, Veronica blinked her emerald-like eyes in alarm and shook her charred arm before the iron-skinned doll in its intricate, imposing red gown, saying, "You are my mother and the queen of the kingdom. Your status is far superior to mine. How could I possibly be discontent with you? If you don't want me out, I really shouldn't be out. Confining me is your rightful authority." Something feels odd. Is this what the real Veronica would say? Gazing at the seemingly compliant princess, the ferocity on the queen's iron face hesitated momentarily. Then she blinked her ruby eyes and opened her porcelain-trimmed iron lips, warily saying, "Stop pretending, you must be up to something. But I'm telling you, whatever you plan, it's already too late." Joshua went with his uncle to the upper chamber of Parliament early. According to the agenda, they're already discussing the succession order over there. Now, even if you try to pull some tricks, you wouldn't change the course of events. Joshua's already taken over the royal family's affairs. I'm telling you, from now on, no matter what you do, the next king will only be Joshua. You might as well give up. You are right. Blinking her glassy eyes, Veronica nodded and earnestly replied, "Joshua's talents are indeed remarkable, far beyond my capabilities. No one else can be the next king but him. In terms of character, talents, or wisdom, he surpasses me significantly." Upon hearing Veronica's words, the queen was silent for a while. Then her iron face suddenly flushed with a tinge of angry crimson. "Damn it! There's no one more insulting than you. Joshua may be my own flesh and blood, but can I, his mother, not know his nature? Are you praising him? Or are you trying to disgust me? As if you're spitting in my face? Damn it! Even if you retort like before, smirking as you mock me with a couple of lines, it would be better than praising him stiffly like this. Don't be so disgusting. You're way out of line." After stomping her foot angrily twice, the infuriated iron-skinned queen no longer cared to figure out why the princess was smashing things. She turned around intent on leaving, but Veronica grabbed her arm. "Where are you going?" Seeing the iron-skinned queen in front of her, eyes filled with anger, Veronica blinked before suggesting apologetically, "Did I say something wrong that upset you? How about this? I'll give you a gift as a proper compensation." Saying this, she reached into the ruins of the shelf, picking up a beautiful doll dressed in thin pajamas with a face full of surprise and anger, and handed it to the iron-skinned queen, full of apologies. "I've kept this doll for 6 years. Today, I'll give it to you as an apology, and you can do whatever you want with it. Get lost. Who wants your lousy doll?" With a slap sound, the doll Veronica handed over was swatted away by the furious queen, crashing onto the floor, a large gash carved by splintered wood on its shoulder. Blood oozing from the wound stained the carpet a large patch. Yet it seemed the iron-skinned queen did not find a bleeding doll to be strange, completely ignoring the doll showing pain on the floor, and instead glared at Veronica angrily, saying, "I'll definitely talk to your father about this. Damn it! Let go of me. Don't pull on me." When hearing the iron-skinned queen's words, Veronica released her grip on the queen's arm as if electrocuted, even stepping back half a step. However, Veronica did not care, instead quickening her pace to catch up to the queen, who stormed off, asking cautiously, "What's wrong? Don't you like my gift? How about this? If you don't like it, you might as well just burn her." "Mother? Why are you ignoring me?" "I'll ignore you to hell." Overwhelmed by Veronica's sarcastic demeanor, the iron-skinned queen suddenly turned her head, shouting angrily, "You? Huh? Is there something you want to say?" With her cold palm tightly covering the queen's mouth, the Princess Veronica, with half of her face missing, finally showed a happy smile, dragging the struggling queen along as she happily said, "Mother, the light over there isn't good. If you have anything to say, why don't you come over here with me and say it? Although I'm not your real child, I'm still your daughter. So as long as you can speak and give a command, I promise to listen to whatever you say, all right? MMM. facing Veronica, who seemed to have lost her mind. The queen widened her eyes in panic, struggling and mumbling for help to the guards following behind. However, those guards with equally metallic faces seemed to see nothing, following behind unhurriedly, not a single one stepping forward to save her. Even if attracted by her muffled cries, at most they would look up, and upon seeing no command given, would lower their iron-gray faces again, continuing to follow behind the two, fulfilling their duty to protect the queen. "Mother, look, the flowers in the royal garden have bloomed. Could you help me pick one?" As the iron-skinned queen struggled, Veronica dragged her to an open window, pinning her against the windowsill, and under the queen's terrified expression, shoved her out. "Ah! Thank you, Mother. You're so kind." Watching as the queen fell from the window over 20 meters high, smashing onto the stone floor of the garden and shattering to pieces, Veronica nodded with satisfaction, then turned around to smile at the iron-skinned guards behind her, saying, "Where is my father? It's been so many days since I last saw him. I kind of miss him." It seems middle school geometry is still valuable. After getting off the carriage that only operates within the inner palace, Leon looked at the outer wall of the sleeping quarters, now coated with a layer of iron, and once again confirmed his earlier judgment. The abnormal object causing the changes should be in the palace, and its location is roughly where I calculated it to be, most likely right in front of me in these sleeping quarters. Outside in the squares and streets of the palace, only the living beings like pedestrians and horses were affected. But inside the inner courtyard of the palace, even dead objects like the walls and buildings have started to become iron-like. Although the stone path underfoot still feels like stone, the floating dust and grime on its surface have, at some point, turned into dark brown rust marks. Although the distant garden is still lush, it feels significantly less lively. The leaves at the treetops no longer sway with the wind, and rather than a carefully constructed garden, it resembles a gigantic metal bonsai. But the biggest change is right in front of me, the sleeping quarters. The originally quaint, solemn architecture with a weighty sense of history has suddenly become much more smooth and frivolous. Large pieces of dark red iron have appeared on the pointed top, and the tall, elegant windows have become short, chubby, and round, losing their clear edges. They have almost turned into a completely different form. This bizarre transformation is like gluing together the distinct joints of a human hand with some immensely powerful glue, then kneading all the bones and flesh into a sphere, exuding an odd vibe everywhere, standing out so incongruously compared to the other buildings around. "Chief!" While Leon was feeling the black goat's head, examining the palace with soul vision, Joshua, having stepped off the carriage, quickly caught up, exclaiming with a shocked expression, "What on earth happened here? Why's the palace suddenly like this?" "You ask me, who should I ask? I want to know too." After glancing back at Joshua, whose face still bore a slap mark, Leon replied, "An abnormal object must have been triggered. I just took a good look and didn't see any conspicuous abnormal souls, so it's likely that the thing causing the palace to change like this has no user, and is an abnormal object running amok due to losing control. Then, what should we do? Shouldn't we halt our action?" "We can't halt." Using the soul vision granted by the black goat, after discovering the princess's fluctuating soul flame in her bedroom, Leon couldn't help but breathe a slight sigh of relief and then strode forward, saying, "This is probably the only opportunity for those of you with abnormal objects to participate in a coup. If we stop now, who knows how hard it would be to recreate a scene like this again. Furthermore, Princess Veronica is still within the range of this abnormal object. Her succeeding the old king would result in the least damage to the kingdom. If anything happens to her, we'll have to prepare for the worst. If that happens, even if we succeed in the end, very many people will die. The whole kingdom will be severely weakened. It might take 2 or 3 generations to recover, so now we can only grit our teeth and move forward." "Got it." After nodding vigorously, Joshua, looking a bit tense, asked, "Chief, should we protect the princess first to ensure nothing happens to her? Or should we knock out the guards captain? Let me take over his body, and have him distract the guards so that our men can storm in? Save the princess first or find the guards captain?" looking at the princesses anxiously, frightenedly dancing soul flame, which yet remained in the room without moving. Leon decisively said, "Let's do both at once. We'll split up. Something strange seems to be happening on the princess's side, and I need to check it out to make sure she's safe. As for Luke, you're currently in the prince's body. The guard's captain won't be overly cautious with you. If you launch a surprise attack, it shouldn't be hard to knock him out." "All right, I'm on it." Upon hearing Leon's instructions, Joshua nodded. "Where's your captain? I need to see him. Take me there quick." Upon hearing Joshua, the iron-skinned guard standing by blinked, seemingly awakening from a dream, and lifted his ceremonial baton, striking Joshua hard across the head. No one had expected the palace guards to actually attack the prince, and caught off guard. This blow landed solidly on Joshua's head, causing him to collapse with a thud. "What the heck?" Stunned by this senseless blow, Leon hurriedly pulled the fallen Joshua up and found him unconscious from the strike, immediately looking at the guard with disbelief. "Why did you hit him?" "Your Highness." Facing Leon's angry question, the guard holding the baton hastily saluted, blinking his glassy eyes, confusion openly displayed on his iron face. "He's a commoner, dressed in criminal garb, approaching the sleeping quarters so rashly. Of course, he had to be struck away. But that's Joshua's body, what nonsense are you talking?" Upon hearing this, Leon couldn't help frowning, but as he was about to speak, something hit him suddenly. Both Luke, who inhabited Joshua's body, and himself are holders of abnormal objects with contamination values, so they're unaffected by cognitive tampering and retain normal human perceptions, able to distinguish between humans and iron-skinned people. Even when checking his own body, his self-image appeared completely normal in his sight. Without physically touching, they couldn't even sense that they had become iron-skinned people, seeing each other as normal. As for Joshua, he doesn't have an abnormal object, but he visited the headquarters of the cleanup bureau and saw a bunch of abnormal objects. Just from that trip, he must have gained a small contamination value, thus also gaining the ability to distinguish humans from iron. But the iron-skinned soldiers in front are different. These ordinary people, influenced by the abnormal object and believing themselves to be iron-skinned people, if they showed no suspicion upon seeing us, it proves that in their view both Joshua and I are probably iron-skinned people as well. And this observation between iron-skinned people doesn't seem to be based on their physical bodies. Their senses seem to lean more towards the soul or maybe identity, status, or profession. So while Luke inhabited Joshua's body, in the eyes of the iron-skinned guards, he isn't Joshua the prince, but a commoner criminal approaching the sleeping quarters. Hence the unhesitating blow. This is a problem. Watching Luke, unconscious from the blow and automatically separating from Joshua's soul, Leon sighed and then pinched hard on the point between Joshua's nose and upper lip. "Ah!" Involuntarily shouting, the unconscious Joshua shot upright, while the nearby iron-skinned guard rubbed his eyes, then exclaimed in shock, "Your Highness? You were just... Ah!" The scream from high above interrupted the guard's words. A doll in a bright red gown with an iron skin screamed as it fell from the outer window of the chambers, crashing with a thud far away, startling Leon. "What was that?" "Reporting to your Highness." Upon hearing Leon's inquiry, the iron-skinned guard blinked his hollow glass eyes and answered deferentially. "If you mean who the one who fell just now was, it should be the esteemed queen." "Ha! Your mom's dead." Looking at the iron-skinned queen on the ground, Leon couldn't help but sigh. This wasn't an insult. It was merely stating a fact. The iron-skinned queen had fallen from a great height, landing directly on the stone tablet beside the garden, shattering into pieces, with some parts even scattered into the garden. Not far off, a large iron but clad in red shorts was hanging on a tree branch, seemingly dead beyond doubt. How could this happen? Seeing the iron-skinned queen broken into pieces on the ground, Joshua, who had woken up not long ago and whose mind was still in a fog, couldn't help but move his lips, feeling a bit like crying. But after trying to work up some feelings, and with 2 downward turns of his mouth, he found he couldn't cry, so he just stared dazedly at the fragments of the Iron-Skin Queen. Even though Leon had explained that this large red iron doll could very well be the real queen, there was still a big difference between an iron doll and a person, making it difficult to truly stir up the emotions. This is truly an utterly unexpected development. Although he had a terrible impression of the queen and an average one of Joshua, at the end of the day, the dead were supposed to command respect, and Leon, who had a decent level of morality, refrained from speaking ill. Instead, he helped pick up the queen's iron head and handed it to the bewildered Prince Freckles. Here, take this. Due to the Iron-Skin Guard's unique senses, they didn't recognize Luke temporarily inhabiting Joshua's body, thwarting his plan to take over as the Guard's leader. However, the good news was that while the Iron-Skin Guards didn't recognize the prince's body, their obedience to him as a prince was incredibly high. It seemed that for the Iron-Skin people, once transformed, the priority of tags like identity, status, and occupation was elevated to the highest level, such that commands from people with higher status and duties could not be defied. If they were regular guards, there would be a million reasons why he couldn't redirect them from their posts. But for guards transformed into iron dolls, as long as their orders didn't conflict with those of someone with higher status, they had to follow them. So now, it seemed that he didn't need Luke to command these guards to leave their posts, thus allowing the rebels waiting outside the palace to storm in, which could be considered a blessing in disguise, or perhaps indeed a blessing. Seeing Joshua sitting dumbfounded on the ground with the queen's iron head, Leon couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Though it seemed a bit cruel to think this way, for him, the queen's demise was indeed a good thing, and the fact that she died due to an anomaly was even more so. Nonetheless, while both Joshua and his mother were unpleasant, witnessing his own mother's sudden death was somewhat harsh for the young Prince Freckles. My condolences. Considering that they were all human, Leon patted Joshua's shoulder as a gesture of comfort, then took out the witch's broom, climbed on, and prepared to fly to the window of the princess's bedroom to check on the situation. But, accompanied by a hysterical scream, the iron head in Joshua's hand suddenly opened its eyes, furiously shouting, "I'll kill you! Damn Veronica! How dare you push me off the building? What the hell? Wait, you were hanging on a tree and you didn't die? Your soul was quiet just now." Shocked, Leon turned back and looked at the iron head that bizarrely came back to life, swearing in Joshua's arms, and couldn't help but say with extreme speechlessness, "You're still alive? Of course I'm alive. If she hasn't died, then why should I? Are you that Duke of Lionheart?" With a blink of the red ruby eyes on its face, a touch of malice crept onto the Iron-Skin Queen's face as she suddenly shouted with full malice in her eyes. "Great timing! I now order you, go upstairs immediately and kill that damn—" "Wait, you're going to command me?" Upon hearing the Iron-Skin Queen's words, Leon's eyebrows suddenly raised, recalling how the Iron-Skin Guards at the palace door exhibited exceptional obedience to him as a prince. This isn't good. Though he appeared human, it was only through his own eyes. In reality, he had been affected by the anomaly as well. According to the Iron-Skin people rule he had discovered, an Iron-Skin person of higher status could easily command one of lower status. And when it came to status, the queen, who ranked just below the old king, was clearly above him, a prince chosen by the princess, so there was no way he could let her finish her command. "Here you go." In Joshua's stunned gaze, Leon, who was already preparing to leave, suddenly turned and raised his leg, executing a powerful kick that sent the iron head flying out of Joshua's hands. With 10 points in his contamination value, Leon's physical ability had already surpassed that of ordinary humans. The force of that kick was astounding, and the speed terrifying, issuing an extremely sharp whoosh as it sliced through the air. Facing this kick that exceeded human limits, the vengeful Iron-Skin Queen didn't even manage a scream before her nose was slammed into, her entire head shooting up like a meteor, streaking into the palace's garden and completely disappearing. Seeing his biological mom being kicked and disappearing with a whoosh into the Iron Garden, the unfortunate Prince Freckles was dumbfounded. From the Iron-Skin Queen crashing to the ground with a thump to taking off with a bang, though it all happened within a brief 2 minutes, for Joshua, It was a bizarre experience of unparalleled twists and turns. Within those short 2 minutes, the emotional upheaval in Joshua's heart was indescribable. But if forced to summarize, it would likely consist of 3 stages. My mom's dead. My mom's alive. My mom flew. Plop! Until he heard the splash of a heavy object falling into a lake from an unknown distance. The Prince Freckles, whose mom had died, lived, and then catapulted away in those 2 minutes, finally snapped out of his trance, scrambling over the fence and running frantically toward the artificial lake in the garden. Mother! It's not my fault. Your mom started it. Watching Joshua run into the garden crying, Leon couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Kicking someone's mom away face to face was indeed overly harsh. But if he didn't kick, allowing the Iron Skin Queen to give her command would have been more than just overly harsh. I need to ask you something. Leon quickly walked back to the palace entrance and addressed the Iron Skin guard still standing there. What happens when you Iron Skin people go into water? Do you die? Not quite. The Iron Skin guard shook his head and replied, We'll just rust, and if we stay in too long, movement will be difficult until we get polished again. That'll do. Nodding at the response, Leon gave orders. Do me a favor. The queen fell into the lake. Get all the guards to go into the garden and help Prince Joshua fish out the queen. After retrieving her, stay in there and swim for a while before coming out. Also, find a couple of the fastest guards to the street at the palace gate and see if there are any rebel lurkers. If there are, tell them they can now storm the palace. Understood. I'm on it. When a certain prince kicked the ironclad head of the queen, and then directed the guards to open the door to invite the robbers, Princess Veronica had already led the queen's attendants to find the old king who was reading in the study. Noticing the familiar figure outside the study door, the old king, whose body was covered in rust and even his glass eyeballs had a murky hue, frowned and said, Didn't I order you to be locked up for a week? Who let you out? Mother let me out. Outside the door, the princess gracefully bowed, her green glass eyes full of gratitude, and said, Because I knocked over a cabinet and made some noise. Mother was worried I might have been hurt inside, so she had me released. Mother, after listening to the princess's explanation, the old king's frown did not ease up at all. Instead, it furrowed even deeper. Veronica! After calling out the princess's name, the old king, who was basking in the sun by the window, placed the book he was holding on his lap and then asked gloomily, What exactly are you trying to do? Father! The princess outside the study raised her eyebrows in surprise and asked with some confusion, I'm not planning to do anything. Why would you ask that? Not immediately replying, the old king waved his hand towards the attendant behind him, signaling him to turn his wheelchair to face the door, directly confronting the princess outside the study. Then, the old king, with his back to the sunlight, lifted his head. On his rusted ironclad face, his murky gemstone eyeballs, like a hawk, stared at the princess and said word by word, You never called her mother before. Oh, I see. The princess at the door blinked, her clear and bright gemstone eyes meeting the old king's gaze, smiled and said, Now is different from before. The next king can only be Joshua, and I no longer have any chance to inherit the throne, and I will be married off far away. And a princess like me, when married far away, whether life is good or bad depends on the attitude of the kingdom towards me. To avoid losing support from the kingdom after marriage, of course, I need to start pleasing Mother and Joshua. Throughout listening to Princess Veronica's reply with furrowed brows, the strange feeling in the old king's heart not only didn't disappear but became more intense. Although the current situation is as Veronica said, a princess married far away would certainly struggle without the kingdom's support, so she should indeed work hard to strengthen her relationship with Joshua and his mother. But, is this something Veronica would do? Looking at the princess who was still smiling in front of his interrogation, although no matter how he scrutinized her, she was indeed his daughter, the old king just couldn't convince himself. He always felt something was wrong. The Veronica in his memory, although not inflexible, was actually very stubborn in many ways, with a temper much more stubborn than it appeared. If she could figure out something like this and was willing to bow to the queen and Joshua for a better future, why didn't she bow to me earlier? If she was willing to abandon those silly notions and continue fulfilling her duties as a princess, always putting the royal family first, the throne would surely be hers, and Joshua wouldn't even stand a chance. You're not Veronica. Gripping the wheelchair's armrest firmly, the old king narrowed his eyes and sharply demanded, "Speak. Who are you really?" "Father." The princess outside the study blinked and said in surprise, "What are you saying? How could I not be Veronica? I am your daughter." "No way," the old king retorted without hesitation. "Veronica is much more arrogant than you. Although she manages to remain polite, she's never respected my queen, let alone Joshua. Someone like her might compromise temporarily for her absurd ideals, but would never bow to someone she looks down on just for a better future." "Father, you've misunderstood." Facing the vigilant old king, the princess at the study door sighed and said, "People always grow and change. I was indeed like that in the past, but I've come to understand now. Although Joshua and Mother's abilities mean nothing to me, they have the finance minister and your support behind them, so I should give them due respect. Therefore, I am not respecting them per se, but the things that support them. Do you understand what I mean by saying this? People always grow and change." Upon hearing Princess Veronica's explanation, a hint of hesitation flashed through the old king's eyes. After a long silence, it seemed he was convinced. His rigidly straight back relaxed slightly, leaning back into his wheelchair. "What a pity!" Shaking his head slightly, the old king in the wheelchair sighed with a weary expression. "Now, everything is already fated, and I can't change it even if I wanted to. In terms of both ability and character, how could Joshua ever compare to you? You've always been my preferred heir. Oh, how much better would it have been if you'd grown up a bit earlier." "Father." Watching the regret and sighs on the old king's ironclad face, which seemed genuine, the princess outside the study bit her lip and then, somewhat agitatedly, walked into the study. "It's not too late." Looking at the old king in the wheelchair, Princess Veronica earnestly said, "You are the only king of this country. As long as you are willing, it's never too late." "I." As if moved by the princess's words, the old king, whose back was not as straight as before, leaned powerlessly against the backrest and sighed. "Whether it's you or Joshua, you're both my children, since I've already promised him." Joshua?" As if realizing something significant, the old king looked at the door in shock and confusion, asking with a perplexed expression, "Weren't you in a meeting at the parliament? How did you suddenly return?" "Joshua returned?" Hearing the old king's words, Princess Veronica's expression slightly froze, and she instinctively turned her head to look towards the door. At that moment, the old king, leaning against the backrest, suddenly pulled out a large-caliber nail gun from beneath the wheelchair seat, aimed it at the back of the iron-faced princess's head, and unhesitatingly fired a shot. Caught off guard, the iron-faced princess was knocked to the ground by the immense force from behind. Before she could get up, the old king behind her coldly raised the gun and fired again. The sound of 4 gunshots echoed, and the iron-faced princess's shimmering metal right knee joint was not only deformed by the impact but firmly locked by 4 nails, rendering her completely immobile. "Guards!" Throwing the nail gun to the attendant behind him, the old king in the wheelchair raised his rust-stained, yet shockingly steady hand, pointing at the iron-faced princess on the ground, and shouted, "Arrest her for me, and send someone to Princess Veronica's room. No. First, check on the queen to see if she's still alive." "Yes." As if he didn't find anything wrong with the scene of father and daughter in conflict before him, after hearing the old king's order, the attendant behind him immediately responded, then got up and rushed towards the fallen princess, preparing to restrain her. However, bang! A muffled sound of metal collision was heard, and the fallen princess raised her slightly scorched metal arm, delivering a heavy slap to the attendant's face. In the squeaking sound of twisting metal, the neck of the metal guard immediately twisted 180 degrees in the wrong direction, and the body below the neck instantly lost control, kneeling down with a thud before the princess. "You are really heartless." After trying to stand up twice but failing because her right knee joint was stuck, the iron-skinned princess spoke with a somber expression. "No matter what, I've called you father many times. You actually shot at me directly?" Glancing at the iron-skinned guard whose head was twisted and kneeling on the ground, and then at the others outside the study who were unresponsive to his orders, the old king in the wheelchair remained silent for a moment, then looked up and coldly replied, "Stop pretending. No matter how many times you call me father, you are not my daughter. All right then. Since you are the king of this kingdom, whatever you say goes." Slightly shaking her head, the iron-skinned princess staggered towards the door, reaching for a hefty ceremonial sword from a metal guard's waist, then proceeded towards the old king, curiously asking, "If I'm not mistaken, there was actually a moment when you believed my words and really thought I was your daughter. But in the end, you still shot. Could you please tell me, why did you change your mind?" Watching the iron-skinned princess walk towards him holding the sword, the old king's metal cheeks moved slightly, then nodded and admitted, "There was a moment I believed Veronica really came to her senses, but after thinking about my life, I immediately knew you could never be my daughter. Whether it's me, Veronica, Joshua, or anyone else, for us royal family members, once we set our minds on something, there's never a possibility of coming to our senses. No one in hundreds of years has defied this rule. It's the curse flowing in our veins." "I see." Stepping with a limp through the study, reaching the old king, the princess holding the sword thoughtfully nodded. "No wonder you only advised me once or twice. After realizing I persisted in my views instead of trying to change my mind, you directly began preparing for Joshua's succession. Is it because you thought trying to advise me would only make me wary, make me guard against you, so you chose not to persuade, but instead tried to support me, making me think you agreed with my views?" "Not just that." Sitting up straight in the wheelchair, the old king coldly said, "My real concern was that after discovering my firm stance, Veronica would temporarily pretend to be compliant, and after I handed the throne to her, would then proceed with her own plans, siphoning the royal family's bloodline to sustain the kingdom. Monster, tell me, how do you know about such things? I've only privately advised Veronica a few times. No one else should know the specifics. What on earth are you?" "I told you, I am your daughter." The metallic fingers pressed the spring, discarding the ornate scabbard, as Princess Veronica held the unsharpened ceremonial sword, gently questioning, "By the way, although your legs can't move and you can't escape from me, are you not going to resist?" "Father, since a long time ago, I have wanted to see your fearful, desperate, or regretful expression. Could you please grant your daughter this small wish before you die?" Hearing the princess's malice-filled query, the old king simply closed his iron eyelids, covering the two murky-colored gemstone eyeballs. Immediately, a fierce sound of rushing wind echoed in the ears, and the dark world before him started spinning. "Father, you are too old." After slicing off the iron-skinned king's head with a single sword strike, looking at the slumped body on the wheelchair, Princess Veronica shook her head and pointed the sword tip towards the attendants and guards outside the door. "If you were a little younger, and your eyes a bit keener, you would have noticed the abnormalities in the guards outside. Those soldiers?" Hearing the princess's words, the old king's head that had rolled to the ground suddenly opened its eyes widely. "What do you mean?" "I mean, in order to prevent them from listening to your orders and attacking me, I had no choice but to cut off their ears in advance." The iron-skinned princess cheerfully explained. "You probably guessed what happened to you, but what you don't know is that my rule is related to identity, status, and power. Within my rules, those with higher status can forcibly command those with lower status, and I am not exempted even myself. In this aspect, the queen was actually much harder to deal with than you. After all, if I wanted to kill her with a sword, as long as she screamed, 'Don't,' or even begged for mercy in tears, I would have to immediately stop. But you are different. Your dignity doesn't allow you to engage in behavior that damages the dignity of the royal family. When I walk towards you with the sword, you wouldn't panic and scream, nor would you cry and beg for mercy. You would simply close your eyes and wait for death, allowing me to sever your head. And when I chopped off your head, your status and power died with it, which means that no one in this kingdom will be able to defy my orders anymore. As if realizing something, a trace of regret appeared on the face of the old king. The iron-skinned princess smiled with satisfaction and said, "Dear father, thank you for your dignity, which granted me the final victory." "Are you saying this to see my regretful expression?" Glancing at the princess looking down at him, the head of the old king coldly said, "I don't know why you hate me so much, but you haven't won yet. The 12 kingdoms have an agreement with the cleanup bureau that only those with our bloodline can be the king of the 12 kingdoms. So even if you kill me, it's useless. Once the cleanup bureau notices the abnormality in the palace, you will be immediately. The cleanup bureau won't do anything to me." Wielding the heavy iron-backed sword again, the iron-skinned princess smiled and said, "I wasn't lying earlier. I am indeed your daughter Veronica. And as you said yourself, according to the agreement between the 12 kingdoms and the cleanup bureau, only those with the corresponding bloodline can be the king of the 12 kingdoms. So, if I move quickly enough and kill off all the royal bloodlines before they arrive, what do you think the people from the cleanup bureau will do?" "What? You want to kill all the royal family?" Upon hearing the words of Princess Veronica, the old king finally couldn't hold back, his eyes widening as he angrily rebuked, "How dare you? Why wouldn't I dare?" Seeing the old king in front of her, no longer maintaining his lofty demeanor due to her words, Princess Veronica couldn't help but curl her lips, expressing delight yet regret as she said, "As expected, in your heart what's most important is always the glory of the royal family, and the sovereignty of the king, things like that. I, your daughter, have never been within your consideration." But it's not that I've never been there. When mother was not sick and could still help you like Joshua's mother did, your paternal love towards me was real." Looking at the old king, who was angrier than when she had beheaded him, the Iron Princess couldn't help but shake her head, coldly summarizing, "But once mother passed and my maternal family's resources were drained dry like the Ryan family now, completely losing their value, I, a daughter who couldn't provide any resources, was no longer qualified to receive paternal love. You were a decent father and never stingy with your affection. It's just a pity your affection was conditional, requiring me to first submit my value. You." After listening to Princess Veronica's analysis of this father, the expression of the old king on the ground slightly froze. Then he asked with doubtful eyes, "You? How do you know these things? Are you really Veronica?" "Father, I've said so many times, I am Veronica." Looking at the old king, still skeptical, the Iron Princess sneered, "However, I am not your loving daughter who cherishes family ties. Although I hate to admit it, strictly speaking, I should be considered the dark side she voluntarily suppressed." "What do you mean?" "It means I am the collection of those thoughts she doesn't want to acknowledge." The Iron Princess looked down upon the old king, her face devoid of expression, and said, "Have you never wondered why your daughter seems to never show any negative emotion? When she lost her mother and needed comfort the most, being neglected by you, she never complained. She did her utmost to be a good princess but hardly received any praise. She never felt too disappointed. Though fully supporting the royal family, she was still provoked by her stupid brother and criticized and reprimanded by an even more foolish stepmother. She never cursed them with resentment. Even when you expressed the intention to strip her of her years of efforts and marry her off, her first reaction was to find a solution rather than having a big fight with you. Don't you find it strange?" "I? No more I. You should truly thank me for having such an excellent daughter." Seeing the old king somewhat shocked, with guilt flashing in his eyes, the Iron Princess shook her head. "Since she picked me up 6 years ago and kept me in her bedroom, the hope that I represent, changing the kingdom and ensuring tragedies do not recur, became her inner reliance. Over the years, she has felt anger, she has complained, but those surging negative emotions, that resentment and unwillingness were suppressed by the hope and ideals I represented. But those impulses and malice she suppressed with reason never simply disappeared upon seeing me. She endured you for 6 years, and all the suppressed feelings accumulated in me over these years. When you confined her to her bedroom, all these things accrued over 6 years finally surpassed the limits her reason could suppress. As her inner resentment grew beyond kindness and reason, that's when I had to suppress her. So, it was the incident 3 days ago that triggered Veronica, becoming the last straw that awakened the anomaly in her bedroom? After listening to the Iron Princess's tale, the old king's face couldn't help but show deep annoyance. He looked at the daughter in front of him, murmuring with regret, If only I had known earlier." Hearing the old king's words, the Iron Princess briefly paused. A hint of struggle flashed in her emerald glass eyes. "Yet, I shouldn't have confined you in the bedroom. Indeed, someone like you is wholly impossible to feel regret." After a moment of speechless silence, as if something that had been tethered broke suddenly, a humane smile appeared on the stiff iron face of the princess. Subsequently, her twisted leg joint, hit by the nail gun, weirdly restored, even gained a touch of non-metallic softness and agility, suddenly adding a trace of human essence. "Thank you, my father." After moving her joints, now much softer and hardly different from a human's, the Iron Princess smiled and said, "Sorry, I deceived you earlier. Actually, I am not Veronica, but I am indeed an anomaly revived by her repressed dark side." Looking at the angry and shocked old king on the ground, the Iron Princess, increasingly human-like, thanked him with a smile. As a direct descendant of the 13 royal families, Veronica's will is far more resilient than I expected, even now preventing me from completely killing you. If it weren't for you personally killing her last bit of innocence, I fear I would still be entangled with her for a long time, even potentially suppressed by her, failing to kill all the royal family. Haha, looking at it this way, you are truly my father, as without you I probably wouldn't be born at all. And to thank you for your kindness to me." Within the old king's remorseful expression, the Iron Princess once again raised her ceremonial sword, swinging it down directly. "I will give you a painless end." Could it be I was really wrong? Looking at the princess with eyes no longer hesitant, the old king's jewel-like eyes finally showed lingering regret as she swung the sword toward his forehead with a smile. If I could have been better to Veronica, if I could have cared for her a bit more, even trusted her a bit, would the situation now be different? But everything is too late now. Bang! Just as the old king, full of remorse, looked at the descending ceremonial sword, prepared for death and despair, the window beside them suddenly exploded, a surging airflow enveloping shattered window frames and glass shards, crashing directly into the study. What the? The old king has been decapitated already? Controlling the airflow carried by the witch's broom, after blasting away the armored princess holding a ceremonial sword, Leon looked at the old king's armored head on the carpet and couldn't help but hiss, feeling a bit of a toothache. Upon entering the bedchamber and finding the princess, discovering she had been turned into a doll, he immediately thought of the queen who had been pushed down the stairs and instantly understood the ultimate target of this armored abnormality. Although it wasn't bad for him that the old king has kicked the bucket, considering he still wasn't clear about the situation with this abnormality, he worried that there might be serious consequences after the king was finished, so he suppressed his selfish desires and rushed over immediately. In order to save time, he didn't even climb the stairs, but flew over directly on the witch's broom. But ultimately he was still half a step too late, as the old king had already followed in the queen's footsteps. This is truly, strictly speaking, the Virgo division under the Bureau of Public Order technically counts him as part of law enforcement. So is it really destiny for the police to always arrive a step too late? Ahem! As Leon turned into the study through the window shattered by the storm, picking up the old king's head with a hint of disdain, the armored princess, who was blasted outside the study wall, opened her eyes again amidst the rubble. The cleanup bureau's people sure arrived fast, but it doesn't matter anymore. Shoving the sofa off her body, the armored princess stood up, looked at Leon, who was trying to reattach the old king's head, and said with a cheerful tone, "Don't bother. Even though he can still talk, His identity and status are already killed by me. So even if you put his head back on, he can't order me around anymore. Turns out it's another undead class abnormality. Seeing the twisted legs and feet recover quickly, even the shards of glass embedded in her body were pushed out of her. Leon couldn't help but frown, then firmly gripped the witch's broom. His lust dream invader was taken by the director for use by the Snow Maiden for protection. Now in his hand, the only abnormality with supernatural damage capability left is the storm of the witch's broom. 2 months ago, even with this thing in his hand, he would be chased by a group of ordinary people, but now his contamination value is near 10 points, just a bit short of reaching the level 2 cleaner threshold, and he had made significant progress. Although the upper limit of witch's broom is not high, under the propulsion of 10 points of contamination value, it should still have no problem to whip up a storm to suppress the seemingly no special abilities princess. Boom! Just do it. Following the teachings in the Emma Remnant scripture, communicate with your opponent as little as possible when unnecessary. Leon immediately activated the witch's broom, stirring up an intense gust from top to bottom, pressing the armored princess firmly onto the carpet. Immediately after, Leon charged forward without hesitation, reaching out his right hand towards the fallen armored princess. The pajama doll that Veronica turned into. He touched it all over a few times but couldn't get any information out. So the body of this abnormality must be the armored princess right in front of him. As long as his hand could touch her, he would know what she really is. Then he could formulate a strategy based on the information, or even directly purchase her, and swiftly resolve this abnormality outbreak. Hehe. Seeing Leon bursting in and pouncing directly towards her, the armored princess chuckled under the pressure of the storm and slightly opened her mouth. Stop it! In the instant he saw the armored princess's lip movements, Leon's body abruptly froze, turning into a statue completely motionless. Even the storm of the witch's broom came to a halt with him. My dear prince, you're quite impulsive. Climbing up from the carpet, the armored princess extended her now soft hand to touch Leon's cheek, then pointed at the witch's broom, hanging behind him, smiling as she ordered. Go ahead. Break that thing first, then come back and talk with me. As soon as the armored princess finished speaking, Leon's body involuntarily turned back, grabbed the retreating witch's broom, and snapped it over his knee with great force. With the sound of a crack, this broom, which had rendered great service, was snapped into 2 pieces. Damn it, this broom was rented from that witch. The ownership wasn't even with me. Don't be angry. Seeing Leon's slightly annoyed expression, the armored princess giggled. You started it. I just gave you a little punishment. Sweetie, the other me is in your hands, right? Could you hand her over? Not good. Upon hearing the armored princess's words, Leon's heart jolted slightly. To ensure Veronica's safety, he had placed the doll that she became in the mirrored world. But now he cannot disobey her commands if he truly hands Veronica over. Seeing his hand unmoved, not reaching for the cufflink as ordered, Leon narrowed his eyes slightly, suspecting he had figured something out. Could it be, since she also counts as Veronica, orders related to Veronica can't be enforced? Are you unwilling? Seeing Leon narrow his eyes to assess her, the armored princess chuckled, as though she didn't mind at all, saying, If you don't want to listen, then don't. Now I've already replaced my father, becoming the one with the highest status in the kingdom. She can't make any impact anymore. Replace. Kennedy, I get it. Hearing the armored princess's words, Leon seemed to have thought of something and finally opened his mouth for the first time since entering the study. Hey! Seeing Leon suddenly call out, the armored princess raised her eyebrows, tilting her head with a smile. What's up? Nothing much. Just wanted to tell you. Glancing at the old king on the ground, Leon said, Our relationship is over. The engagement is cancelled. Oh? What are you talking about? Before Leon spoke, the armored princess had imagined many scenarios. Whether Leon would curse out loud or plead desperately, logical persuasion or menacing threats would not sway her. But what the armored princess never expected was that the first thing Leon said was that their relationship had broken down, and he wanted to cancel the engagement. And another thing. In the armored princess's stunned gaze, Leon informed her, "I'm the leader of the rebels, and now I'm staging a rebellion. So you've seen through my rules, realizing that my power relies on identity-based stuff, so you're severing the engagement with the princess to negate the identity inferior to mine, then declaring yourself as a rebel to escape control from this queen me? Hey, your mind works pretty fast, but the idea is still a bit naive." Looking at Leon seriously declaring rebellion in front of her, the armored princess couldn't help but laugh silently. If all it took was casually shouting and announcing a rebellion to escape control and regain freedom, that would be ridiculous. My power isn't such an easy thing to break. Though the rebels are indeed opposed to the kingdom, having the identity of rebel leader might lift restrictions from status. Merely stating it isn't enough. To use this method to rid control, at the very least your identity must be a rebel, your status must be that of the rebel leader, and you must actually be conducting rebellious acts perfectly fitting this role for it to work. Ah! Watching as Leon suddenly regained his mobility and lunged at her, the Iron Princess almost popped her eyes out. What the? Are you really doing this? Kingdom's twin pillars, Speaker of the Upper House, Duke of Lionheart, future prince. You've gotten to the point where you're almost second to none, and you're still leading a fugitive rebel group? Isn't this like rebelling against yourself? Are you out of your mind? There was no time to scrutinize what was wrong with Leon's mind as the startled Iron Princess hurriedly sidestepped, barely avoiding Leon's hand reaching for her shoulder. But immediately, her inner ankle was fiercely hooked, causing her to lose her balance and fall. A knee with a metallic sheen was heading straight for her abdomen. Bang! With the dull sound of metal striking wood, the fallen Iron Princess grabbed the remains of the study's outer wall, hauling herself up with all her might, then stretched her legs apart at the last second, letting the deadly knee fall through the air. Leon had learned police combat techniques from a female officer, but his practice time was too short. He only knew the basic moves, not what to do after failing to take down the target completely, causing a slight delay in his actions. Taking advantage of this rare opening, the Iron Princess suddenly kneeled, rabbit-like, kicking at Leon's head. However, Leon reacted in time to dodge and was only hit on his right shoulder. Clang! With a somewhat piercing metal clash, Leon's ironclad shoulder caved in as if smashed by a solid iron hammer, his entire right arm hanging helplessly. Using the recoil from the kick, the Iron Princess propelled herself away, sliding across the floor and hastily moved out of Leon's reach. That was close. Almost got touched by him. Glancing at Leon's hands, the still-shaken Iron Princess took a deep breath, immediately twisting to get up and running toward the guards outside the door. Forget it, even if I can't control him. Gesturing to the guards with 2 gestures to hold off Leon for her, the Iron Princess immediately turned and ran toward the staircase. The whole palace is now mine. In half an hour, when my power continues to spread, even the entire capital will be mine. So many people can pile up and crush him. There's trouble. Seeing the 10 or so guards approaching with weapons, following the Iron Princess's orders, Leon couldn't help but sigh and took the black goat out from the mirror world. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have loaned out the Lust Dream Invader. I've been with the cleanup bureau for too short a time, haven't collected enough items. Just now, after Witch's Broom broke, I have no main battle anomaly at hand, especially lacking means to clear small fry. After all, fighting a few Iron Skin guards can't mean I have to gulp down Immortal in liquor, and then wear Hand of Screams to brawl with them, can it? After this, I have to quickly find another suitable anomaly. From now on, after tying the excited black goat to his waist, Leon picked up the old king from the floor, hanging him on his belt as well. I declare war on the kingdom. With Leon's declaration of war, a pungent sulfur smell immediately filled the entire study. 2 spiraling black ram horns also appeared above Leon's head, glinting with dark red sparks. See, at critical moments, you have to rely on me. Amid the black goat's triumphant boasting, Leon, with a goat head on one side of his belt and the old king's head on the other, turned and charged directly at the guards. After sizing up Leon's appearance, realizing their job content, the guards, already under orders, seemed like they'd been given an extra boost of adrenaline. They immediately charged into the study with weapons in hand, shouting chaotically, "Rebel! Defend the palace!" From further down the hallway, the Iron Princess's shout also echoed. "Someone, a rebel is assassinating the king. Quickly notify the guard captain, and call the defense force. Damn it, capture him for me." Under the Iron Princess's orders, the Iron Guards in the entire sleeping palace rushed up the stairs, trapping Leon on this floor, charging several times without breaking out. However, although the Black Goat's mind was unreliable, its abilities were incredibly dependable. The moment Leon declared war, the effect of the endless blood battle was completely activated. Surrounded by a hellish aura, with a demonic silhouette behind him, Leon fearlessly stormed into the mob of guards, relying on the double undying nature of the goat head and heart, engaging in close combat with the mass of guards. "Would you really come alone to assassinate the king?" Seemingly infuriated by Leon's arrogance, a hefty iron-skinned guard raised his ceremonial sword and swung at Leon in anger, shouting, "Rebel! Indeed I am." Leon casually answered him, slightly tilting his head to take the hit with his shoulder. Although palace guards might not be suited for the battlefield, their physical fitness is undoubtedly exceptional. Facing a solid iron sword swung down with full force, even with Leon's physique, his shoulder caved, his upper body harshly jolted, nearly toppling over. But before the iron-skinned guards could celebrate, the demonic silhouette behind Leon shivered slightly, and his caved shoulder eerily returned to normal, even replacing the paint that had been stripped off. "Hand it over!" With his arm raising once more, gripping the ceremonial sword's thick blade, Leon yanked it forcefully, pulling the surprised guard, who was almost 2 heads taller and looked powerless, along with it. Not letting go? Seeing the iron guard who stubbornly held the sword hilt, Leon, urgently needing a weapon, without hesitation, lifted his leg and kicked him between the legs. Strangely enough, the iron guard seemed unfazed, still clutching his sword, refusing to let go. The surrounding iron soldiers took advantage, brandishing weapons and swinging at Leon. "Oh crap, I underestimated them." After taking 2 sword strikes and 3 blows in 1 second, Leon finally realized. The queen and the king didn't die from losing their heads, so kicking his buddy shouldn't matter. Should it? Need to change the badge. After switching out the egg badge and bringing forth, "Pity it's not," Leon raised his arm to desperately fend off the iron-skinned guard's weapons, while swinging his right leg around to deliver another fierce kick to the hefty guard's weak spot. Bonk! Ah! With the help of "Pity it's not," the stout guard who had suffered a deadly kick screamed once and immediately let go, clasped his legs, and knelt down with a thud, unable to rise again. After going through this, Leon not only got a weapon from his hands but also found the trick to dealing with these iron-skin guards. Once these guards are iron-coated, their bodies become incredibly solid. They don't feel pain and are very tough, each one more difficult than the last. If I really want them not to stop me, I might have to dismember them one by one. But with the egg-kicking badge installed, it's not that troublesome anymore. Just explode their eggs one by one. Ensure that with each kick they're down, and they won't get up for at least 5 minutes. Simply perfect. After giving himself a mental thumbs up for his acuity, the fully recovered Leon once again pinpointed a target, grabbed the opponent's weapon and tugged it over, disrupting their balance, followed by a heavy kick. The unlucky fellow immediately cried out in agony and fell, following in the footsteps of the sturdy guard. Now that the way to handle them is known, the following actions become much simpler. Amidst the repetitive cycle of bang and ah, the iron-skinned guards, as robust as little calves, each clasped their legs and knelt down in a line. All over the corridor resounded with the groans of the fallen guards. "Stop! Stop!" When over 20 guards were mostly on their knees, someone finally gave up resisting, hurriedly threw down his weapon, clasped his legs, and said in horror, I surrender. Bang! Ah! After prying apart the legs of the pleading guard and giving a kick, sending him to line up with the Wudong group, Leon, finally free from the entanglement, quickly dashed toward the staircase, while inwardly apologizing to the iron-skinned guards. "Don't blame me for being harsh. I'm doing this for your good. If I don't do this, I'd have to use heavy hands to get rid of you. But after this anomaly is resolved, it's uncertain if people with decapitated heads can live, right? It's better to have a small explosion than a big one, right? He got out. Get him. Don't let him go upstairs." Seeing Leon break free from those guards' entanglement, the subsequent guards hurriedly filled in to try to entangle Leon and prevent her from going upstairs to find the Iron Queen. However, in the relatively spacious study, a one-on-many fight might hold Leon for a while, but the stairway is much narrower, and at most 2 or 3 people could confront Leon simultaneously before they were quickly taken down. The cycle of bang-a-bang explosions echoed up the stairway, reaching the ears of the Iron Queen. Damn it! Couldn't stop him even for this little while? Realizing that Leon seemed to have already caught up, the Iron Queen clenched her fist, then shouted to the flag officer beside the tower. "Isn't it ready yet? Notify the stationed guards to come over. Does it need this long to signal? Well, it should have been notified long ago. But the one signaling seems a bit off." Looking at the semaphore response from the distant barracks, the flag officer's iron face was full of confusion and said, "I reported that something happened on our side and needed support, and they signaled back that everything was fine. Then I said the royal palace was under attack and requested immediate deployment. They replied that the situation was stable. Just now, I tried to notify them again, telling them it's extremely urgent and immediate deployment is required. But they replied with 'Long live the kingdom.' I have no idea what's going on. What kind of nonsense is this?" Snatching the telescope from the flag officer's hands and glancing at the barracks semaphore, realizing the other side was indeed red and messaged back, the Iron Queen gritted her teeth, internally cursing the old king and the barracks commander. A bunch of idiots. How could such an important position to guard the royal palace be entrusted to someone so dumb? The army responsible for guarding the royal palace can't even understand semaphore? This damned kingdom is truly rotten. Forget it, expecting the guards to rush over isn't realistic anymore. Hearing the noise gradually approaching from downstairs, aware that Leon had nearly caught up, the Iron Queen stamped her foot, tossed the telescope back to the flag officer, ordered him to continue signaling here, and hurriedly ran toward another staircase, planning to get out of the palace first. There are only dozens of guards inside the palace, but the 2 squads alternate guarding the royal palace have a total of 800 or 900 men, with even more considering the 4 patrol teams outside the palace. As long as I leave the palace, I can assemble the guards and temporarily hold off this troublesome guy, then head directly to the guard barracks, lead them to kill all the royal family members, and by then he definitely can't stop the organized army. And through the sole vision of the Black Goat, noticing the Iron Queen's movements, Leon followed suit down the stairs, only to be blocked by the fallen soldiers along the way, with new iron-skin guards continually entering the palace, temporarily blocking him in the staircase. Looks like I have to take another route. After much effort to go down a floor, discovering a large group of soldiers still blocking below, while the Iron Queen's soul had already rushed out of the palace, Leon hesitated slightly, then directly flipped over the handrail amidst the shocked gazes of the iron-skin guards below. Boom! With a loud crash, Leon fell headfirst from a 6th-floor height, directly hitting the ground on the 1st floor, smashing several pieces of stone tiles in the stairwell. Upon hearing the loud noise, the princess turned her head in alarm, finding Leon staggering to his feet, swaying toward her and gave her a shiver from her scalp to her feet. Damn it! How can he be so relentless? Guards! Seeing Leon desperate enough to jump off to chase her, afraid she'd be caught before completing her goal, the Iron Queen had to run while shrieking. Someone! Help! The rebel wants to kill me! Guards! However, peculiarly, despite the Iron Queen's prolonged shouting, there wasn't a single response. The guards supposed to be stationed inside the palace seemed to have mysteriously disappeared. No trace of them despite her calls. What's going on? Where are all the guards? Unbeknownst to her, the palace guards had been redirected by Leon to practice diving at the garden's pond. After shouting for a while with no response and Leon closing in, the Iron Queen bit her lip and sprinted toward the palace gates. No guards? No problem. There are people on the streets. Letting those people entangle him is just the same. Resolute on her plan, the Iron Queen darted toward the palace exterior with all her might, but Leon, relentless behind her, had repaired his body, his heavy footsteps growing louder and closer. Each seemed to crush on Iron Queen's heart, making it sink deeper. Not good. The palace covers quite an area, plus there's a plaza outside. At the current pace, I might be caught before I even run out of the palace or enlist help from outside. What do I do? However, just when the Iron Queen was about to despair, as if even fate was on her side, a mass of armed people stormed in from outside the palace, entering her command range. Saved. No time to ponder why so many ordinary folks barged into the palace. The Iron Queen, overjoyed to have reinforcements, directly pointed to the approaching Leon, shouting at the top of her lungs. Quick! I order you, catch him for me. Huh? Seeing Princess Veronica running out unharmed, the rebels who had barged into the palace were ecstatic, but after hearing her command, deep confusion clouded the eyes of these elite rebels. Princess! Gazing at the jubilant Iron Queen yelling for them to catch Leon. The bald-headed woman who led the rebels into the palace couldn't help scratching her bald head, then pointed to Leon in the distance, dumbfounded, and asked, You want us to catch our own leader? Zover. Looking at the clueless rebels blocking the way completely, the Iron Princess felt a chill run down her spine. Although she had long known from Veronica's memory fragments that this kingdom was already rotten, it was beyond her imagination that it had decayed to such an extent. The stationed guard army in the capital was unable to understand flag signals from their flag officer. The palace guards neglected their duties, and during the day were all absent from their posts. The patrol soldiers outside seemed dead, allowing these rebels to break in without shedding any blood. Yet, how is this possible? Unable to comprehend why she had failed, the Iron Princess, pinned down according to Ryan's orders by the bald woman, felt bitter and began to ponder where the mistake occurred. The palace must have a problem. No matter how rotten the kingdom is, it shouldn't be this bad. And although the old king is stubborn and muddled, he isn't as foolish as his son. At least he can manage a palace. The answer is straightforward then. The cleanup bureau must have done something, and maybe they had early information and specially set up a trap for me. I admit defeat. When Ryan arrived, with a goat's head at his left waist and a king's head at his right, the Iron Princess, pinned to the ground, raised her head with bitterness and said, But can you tell me how I was exposed? Did Watcher's Palace provide some information? Or did someone on our side give you the inside scoop beforehand? Hearing the Iron Princess's question, Ryan's eyebrows slightly raised. Judging from her words, could it be that you are not some sudden rogue abnormality but some antagonistic force against the cleanup bureau, who infiltrated the palace with premeditation? Heh! As Ryan pondered how to extract more information, the black goat at his waist sneered. Practice harder if you're weak. Admit your loss. Can't you die without making excuses? We disdain those with a hard mouth like yours. You, stupid demon, what do you know? Provoked by the black goat's disdainful gaze, the Iron Princess stared angrily at it, about to retort, but seeing Ryan approaching, she quickly warned. Don't come closer. I know your ability. You better not touch me. If you try to touch me, I'll self-destruct instantly to ensure you get nothing. Know my ability, huh? Upon hearing the Iron Princess's threat, Ryan squinted his eyes. Knowing my details means she probably saw my submitted file. She must be from the Bureau, or at least colluded with someone from the Bureau. This is truly... I had known the Cleanup Bureau is a very loose organization with rampant internal chaos. But how can anyone dig out information from it? Is this even feasible anymore? Leon Lane, I know you. Just as Ryan silently cursed the troublesome nature of the Bureau, the pinned Iron Princess took a deep breath and then looked at him standing 2 steps away, gritting her teeth. Leon Lane, a level 3 cleaner of the Virgin Branch in the Cleanup Bureau. has the abnormal ability compulsory intelligence acquisition, and has an excellent affinity with demonic abnormalities. Although joined the Bureau for only over 2 months, the record is astonishing, with a report of single-handedly repelling a Holy Spirit in the first month of employment. Furthermore, during the year-end assembly of the Cleanup Bureau, you publicly exposed the conspiracy of the Aquarius director, survived from his hand, and forced him into exile, later with 2 Level 1 cleaners from the Virgin Branch, disrupted the Scales Gold Sect assembly, killed a Holy Spirit, and repelled the Wealth Goddess from the Dream Realm. Recently, during the arrival of the demonic Soul Abyss, alongside the director of Scorpio Branch who came to aid, you held off the physically arriving King of Nightmares, even personally releasing the Dream Eater mutant shell, consuming most of the Dream Realm, causing the most severe disaster in a century. Impressive. Really anything I file, huh? The MI6 of Britain permeated like a sieve by KGB doesn't seem to have so many loopholes as our cleanup bureau. Although this job gets decent perks, reflecting deeply, it truly is annoyingly troublesome. Watching the Iron Princess recite his resume like a list, with Ryan slightly overwhelmed, he sighed, letting the other rebels retreat a bit, to avoid overhearing too much, then directly retorted. Why are you reciting my file? I mean, I can exchange information with you. Finding finally the opportunity to negotiate, the Iron Princess slightly relaxed her taut body, then directly stared into Ryan's eyes. Do you want to know where I got this information? Or to put it more bluntly, do you want to know who's the traitor within the Cleanup Bureau? Yes. Then you have to tell me first, who is the traitor among us? All right, then you go first.
No.
You go first. Slightly shaking the shoulders under pressure, the Iron Princess insisted. I'm already caught by you. If I go first, what if you change your mind? Either you go first or the deal is off. Fine. Ryan's eyes flickered slightly, then planning to bluff since he knows nothing, hoping to trick some information, he fabricated. I can't mention the name, but I can tell you, it is someone absolutely unexpected by you. Absolutely unexpected by us? Upon hearing, the Iron Princess was slightly stunned, then frowned and said, How does that differ from saying nothing? No deal. No deal then. Understanding the negotiation principle, that whoever seems to care more loses, Ryan decisively chose to overturn the table, extending his hand towards the pinned Iron Princess. Wait a moment. Desperately retreating a bit, dodging Ryan's hand, the Iron Princess angrily said, I didn't say I wouldn't tell you, but at least you need a little sincerity. Just one sentence isn't enough. Then add another sentence. Ryan thought for a bit, then continued to blurt with empty detail. The traitor among you is someone who once died. Once died? Reflecting deeply on Ryan's words, the Iron Princess's expression suddenly tightened. According to this clue, the recently deceased Aquarius director must be one to consider, but besides him, it seems like there are others worth suspecting. Even the old 4-pillar gods were once killed by the Bureau, including perhaps Serpent Bearer? Your turn. Faking profoundness with empty reasoning. Seeing the Iron Princess bewildered and guessing, Ryan urged expressionlessly. So, who's colluding with you in the Bureau, exposing my file? All right. After hearing Leon's inquiry, the Iron Doll Princess stopped pondering, coldly sneered, and said, I can't reveal that person's name either, but I'll tell you one thing. The person who betrayed your file is one of the 87 division chiefs of the Cleanup Bureau. Upon hearing the Iron Doll Princess's words, Leon couldn't help but click his tongue speechlessly. Though he's merely a level 3 cleaner, his file had been involved in true God-level events 3 times, and according to the Bureau's rules, such level events require the authority of division chiefs or higher to access. So once she recited the file, Leon understood that the person leaking information within the Bureau must be one of the 86 division chiefs besides his own chief, thus making the scope of the traitor even broader after her words. Hee. Seeing Leon, rendered speechless by her answer, finally venting his breath, the Iron Doll Princess lifted the corners of her mouth, then said with her head slightly raised, I won't take advantage of you. You told me 2 things, so I'll tell you 2 things as well. If you want to know who the traitor in your Cleanup Bureau is, Investigate the operation with the highest personnel losses in recent years. The operation with the highest personnel losses. Half believing, Leon noted down the sentence, then nodded and said, "In that case, while there's still time, do you have any intelligence you want to exchange?" "Yes." After the glass eyes blinked slightly, the Iron Doll Princess spoke up. "In order to achieve my goal, I've prepared for 6 whole years before finding this opportunity. I want to know how long you've prepared for today." "How long have I prepared for today?" Strictly speaking, this armed coup to attack the palace, I seem to have started preparing last Saturday. It's been some time. Judging from the earlier conversation, Leon assessed that the Iron Doll Princess has a proud personality and seems to seek recognition. Feeling that if he spoke the truth frankly, she might have a mental breakdown, so he responded ambiguously. "Though I haven't been in the cleanup bureau for long, I've seriously prepared for a long time to seize this opportunity today." Really? After hearing Leon's reply, the Iron Doll Princess felt considerably better. Though the biggest reason for her failure was due to betrayal by a traitor, being something beyond combat control, it would be utterly embarrassing if she had been caught effortlessly. Leon's attention was quite comforting to her. "It's your turn," confirming she indeed completed a high-level duel. Though due to an actor in the team, a wrong move was made, the satisfied Iron Doll Princess simply spoke up. "Ask anything you want to know. Even ask 2 more. I'll answer based on the situation." "Thank you." Noticing her remarkably softened attitude, Leon couldn't help but blink and then ask the question he was most eager to know. "What's your purpose for attacking the palace?" "You're asking." Upon hearing Leon's question, the Iron Doll Princess frowned. "Of course, it's to kill all the members of the royal family. What else could it be?" "Oh, why didn't you say so earlier?" Upon hearing the Iron Doll Princess's answer, Leon couldn't help but show a trace of regret. Though there were many despicable creatures with darkened souls in the royal family, most were related to Veronica, making it hard for him to act himself. If he had known what she was planning, he would have let her clean up first before capturing people. "Wait!" Noticing Leon's unusual expression, the Iron Doll Princess suddenly realized, with full suspicion, "If you don't know what my target is, how can you be prepared with the identity of a rebellious leader to bring so many people into the palace to confront me?" "Because I was here to rebel. Who knew you were planning something today too?" "You're misunderstanding." Quickly switching to master performer. Steadying his expression, Leon nonchalantly lied. "Of course, I know your goal is to clean the palace, but I wanted to know not such a superficial goal, but a more profound goal. So you wanted to ask about that." Steadied by Leon's unmoving demeanor, the Iron Doll Princess hesitated for a moment, then said resignedly, "Since I'm doomed anyway, let me tell you, our goal is to kill." Crunch! Like countless predecessors who were silenced precisely at the moment of revealing key information, the Iron Doll Princess shuddered violently as soon as she spoke halfway, with a distinct cracking sound from her chest cavity. Seriously, why so timely? Realizing something was wrong, Leon immediately reached for the Iron Doll Princess, hoping to extract a bit more intelligence while it's still hot. However, the Iron Doll Princess's body instantly shrank, turning into an iron doll barely taller than a palm in a blink of an eye, leaving Leon grabbing at thin air, and then it shattered with a crunch. Soon after, the old king, subdued during Leon's window breaking, and tied to his waist, started humming, while a group of distant Iron Rebel minions suddenly showed a splash of flesh color. Darn! The princess is still in the mirror world. Living beings can't stay inside for long. Noticing the Iron Palace's effect starting to dissipate, Leon quickly reached for his cufflinks, pulling the doll-turned princess out, then reached for the scattered pieces on the ground, managing to touch them before they turned to dust. Name: Remains of Slayer King 3, comma. Appearance: a handful of metal fragments continuously breaking apart, and continuing to do so until completely turned to powder. Ability? Cost? Archive: accidentally triggered word spirit under the deceit and persuasion of Virgo Bureau's Level 3 cleaner Leon Lane. The abnormal object was thus completely destroyed. Every aspect constituting it, including its material, soul, and rules, was extremely thoroughly damaged. Not even time reversal can restore it. Evaluation. Judging by the vast divinity retained in the residue, the origin of this abnormal object is quite intriguing. It might even contain the soul or flesh of a true God-level existence. But having suffered pulverizing damage by a powerful word spirit, apart from its surging divinity, it no longer holds any value. Even for crafting abnormal objects, it causes the object itself to crack and damage due to the strong word spirit residue. Contamination value 60. My goodness, so after all this busyness, besides 2 answers that I don't know are true, I end up with a handful of true God's ashes, while Leon held the Iron Doll Princess's ashes, lamenting the speed of the silencing. The real princess, tossed aside, finally regained the ability to move and pounced directly at him. Leon. I'm here. Catching the princess that pounced at him, Leon comforted her warmly. It's all right now. The abnormal object has been dealt with. No need to say thank you. Feeling slightly embarrassed under the gaze of the distant rebels, Leon quickly covered the princess's mouth, seriously responding. You don't need to thank me. Just do what you're supposed to do in the future, and that's the biggest. Why are you unbuckling my belt? The head. Twisting away the hand covering her mouth, the princess blushingly tugged Leon's belt impatiently. My father is still tied to your waist. SK. Seems we've been found out. Although he wished he could delay a little longer, till the old king dropped dead after regaining his human form, the princess was obviously a little anxious. Leon had no choice but to abandon his plan to continue stalling for time and returned the old king's ironclad head to him. Father? Father. After calling twice and failing to wake the old king, the princess could only hold onto the old king's iron head and hurried back toward the direction of the royal chambers. Fortunately, the effect of Slayer of Kings 3's iron transformation required time to fully activate, and similarly, it needed time to revert back. This left her a window to perform a rescue. By the time the princess hurriedly returned to the study and reattached the old king's head, the old king's body had not yet fully reverted from the iron transformation. Luckily, he hadn't perished due to a head-body separation. Phew, just in time. Watching the old king whose eyelids still fluttered slightly after reattaching his head, the princess, successful in rescuing her father, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then she turned her head back, her eyes glancing complexly at Leon. Even though Leon had placed her in the mirror world, just like Slayer of Kings 3, could read part of her memories, the Princess Veronica, turned into a doll, could see everything Slayer of Kings 3 experienced. This time, had Leon not arrived in time, once the power of Slayer of Kings 3 spread, all members of the royal family, including the old king, would have been slaughtered, but his malice toward his own father was indeed quite considerable. Previously, he insisted on tying his father's head to his waist, which could barely be justified as wanting to protect his father from harm by keeping him close. But had it not been for her urging just now, he would really have feigned ignorance until the abnormal power completely dissipated. And her father and Leon had never even met before. The only possible reason for Leon's great malice towards him could only be because of her matter. In other words, Leon likely did this to eliminate obstacles for her, with the root cause lying with herself. It's quite a headache. Leon. Noticing that Leon shifted his gaze away, avoiding eye contact after perceiving her stare, the Princess Veronica couldn't help but instruct helplessly. My father indeed has many shortcomings, but ultimately he is my father, and he used to treat me well, so no matter what happens in the end, I still hope he can be okay. Can you? Nodding in agreement, Leon, realizing he couldn't kill the old king, answered with some insincerity. An abnormal incident breaking out in the palace already counts as a failure of the local branch. If the king were to die as well, our director would definitely go mad, so I also hope your father can be okay. I seriously doubt you. Hearing this response, 1/10 genuine and 99 parts insincere, The princess couldn't help but shake her head speechlessly and decided to skip this topic entirely, instead asking worriedly, Leon, shouldn't you be in a meeting right now? How's things going over at the parliament? Also, what about Joshua? Joshua, while you're over here playing the father game, he's probably over there playing the mother game, but he shouldn't be in any danger, right? Joshua should be fine, you'll see him soon enough. As for the parliament, after answering Joshua's question, with the armed coup basically a success, Leon, in a good mood, smiled and confidently promised, rest assured, I have things in Parliament under control, guaranteed no problems. That's good. Unaware that Leon's under control meant detaining the dissenting members, and thinking he merely advanced a few proposals according to the original plan, smoothly and steadily. Upon hearing that everything's normal in Parliament, Princess Veronica couldn't help but exhale deeply. With the worry lifted from her heart, she couldn't help but grasp Leon's hand, and said with some guilt, Leon, you've really had a rough time these days. I'm sorry, I've talked to you about so many different things, asked about both the Parliament and Joshua, but haven't asked if you were hurt. Even until now, I haven't thanked you properly for saving me once again. Leon, do you think I'm being overly selfish?
No.
Shaking his head, Leon patted the back of her hand and replied earnestly, You and I are not the same. You have too many responsibilities and things to handle. At times like this, first making sure of the situation is the right thing to do, and it's what you should do. Besides, whether I'm hurt, you can see clearly. There's no need to ask further, and thanks aren't necessary. Whether you say these things or not makes no difference to me. All right then. After listening to Leon's answer, Princess Veronica couldn't help but bite her lip, then sighed helplessly in her heart. I thought you would say something like, between us, there's no need for thanks. Or, it's okay. People always care last about those close to them. But it turned out to be such an answer. Just as the princess, unwilling, grasped Leon's hand in return, preparing to say something more, the iron-transformed palace finally returned to normal, and the iron covering the old king completely faded away, causing him to open his eyes, slightly confused. Where am I? Father! Seeing the old king's entire body huddled on the wheelchair, even his once straight spine now drooped. Appearing old and helpless, Princess Veronica called out once and then pressed her lips together, remaining silent. When the old king came to his senses and moved his body a bit, his gaze suddenly sharpened, and he straightened up from the wheelchair, glaring at the princess as he questioned sharply. Why are you here? Where is Joshua? What are you planning to do? Oh my, I previously thought Joshua's annoying demeanor came entirely from the queen, but it seems your father's no innocent party either. Listening to the ill-natured tone of the old king's successive questions, Leon couldn't help but click his tongue. Then, catching the princess before she could answer, he responded with a grim look. An abnormality just ran rampant. Your head got chopped off. You were about to be finished off. But it just so happened that I was about to bring Joshua back to find someone, and when I discovered something was wrong, I resolved the rampant abnormality. Veronica reattached your head so you didn't die. Any other questions? An abnormality ran rampant. My head, so it wasn't a dream? After hearing Leon's words, the old king, whose eyes were a bit unfocused, finally fully retrieved his pre-coma memories, recalling his conversation with the Iron Princess. Veronica! Seeing the princess before him gazing at him with mixed emotions, her expression both disappointed and distant, the old king remained silent for a moment before averting his eyes and sighed lightly. I'm sorry. I'm not a good father. Unsure whether he was affected by something that the Iron Princess said or if he was emotionally overwhelmed after being struck, the old king, usually cold-faced and even colder at heart, rarely showed a sign of fatherly love and remarked softly, In the past, I wronged you. If you don't want to marry, then don't. Once Joshua ascends to the throne, I will order him to treat you well. You're thinking bullshit. Hearing the rare, true sentiment from the old king, the princess pressed her lips together in silence, while Leon almost burst out laughing. despite knowing the old king had been unconscious early on and was unaware of the current situation. His words still managed to escalate the comedic effect to its peak. At present, the rebels under his command, the enthusiastic citizens inspired by the princess, had basically taken control of the palace and were confiscating the weapons from the guards. Meanwhile, the opposing members of parliament were caught neatly by the spatial anomaly holders from the rebels when they left the parliament and boarded their respective carriages. Who knows where they are, maybe tucked away in some small dark room. It could be said that there were only a few people left in the capital whose words counted now. Although a few streets away, the arriving guard army, which consisted of the old king's staunch confidants who only followed his orders and still held heavy firepower, couldn't theoretically be stopped by the enthusiastic citizens with their military academy dropout level. There was still a possibility of a comeback. But now, with the old king, queen, and prince in our hands, how could the guard army make a comeback? By then, hanging those three outside the palace gates, if they have the guts, they could fire the cannon. They'd face a court-martial for killing one, immediate execution for killing two, and if they killed all three, the princess would directly ascend to the throne. In summary, this game of chess is completely checkmated. Now, instead of ordering Joshua to be nicer to Veronica, it might be better to consider carefully which kind of monkey should be chosen for him to marry, a slim one or a plump one. From the princess's silent demeanor, sensing something amiss, the old king's pupils suddenly narrowed. The slight warmth on his face quickly disappeared, and with a somber brow, he questioned, "Veronica, what have you done?" "Father." Not answering the old king's question, the princess, after a moment of silence, directly met the old king's fierce, vengeful yet slightly panicked gaze, responding calmly, "I will be a good king. Furthermore, in light of what you just said, I'll treat Joshua well. If the finance minister doesn't act rashly, I won't do anything to the queen either. You can rest assured in retirement." Hearing the princess's words and looking into her eyes, which were calm yet concealing sadness, the old king's lips moved slightly, seemingly wanting to say something. But in the end, he didn't, just turned his head and whispered, "Sorry. There's nothing to apologize for. Haven't you always been this way?" The princess bit her lip, pushed the old king's wheelchair out of the study, handed it to the waiting lady outside, instructed her to take the old king to rest, and then stood by the blown-open window by Leon, staring blankly downwards. Veronica, noticing the princess's mood seemed off, not like the joy of successfully seizing the throne, nor the relaxation after achieving a goal, but with a tinge of sorrow, Leon couldn't help but ask softly, "What's wrong?" I'm actually fine." Hearing Leon's query, the princess bit her lower lip. Then, with slightly reddened eyes, she smiled and said, "Just a bit regretful." "Regretful?" "Yes, regretful." She reached out and held onto the edge of the broken windowsill, and facing the cold wind blowing in, she murmured softly with a hint of loneliness, "Regret that the only family I care about, from beginning to end, never acknowledged my feelings, wanting me to agree to something, yet never willing to open their mouth to discuss with me, instead playing tricks before me. Question mark. You don't really think my father said that because he couldn't see the situation, do you?" Looking at Leon, who was bewildered, Princess Veronica sighed softly, saying, "Even though he was unconscious, not knowing you had already taken control of the palace, after waking up to find you and me instead of the queen and Joshua waiting by his side, he should have guessed part of the situation. And he knows my character well, seeing I wasn't busy dealing with the aftermath of the coup but waiting for him to wake up here. He understood we had completely controlled the situation, and Joshua had no chance to ascend. The old king knew?" Hearing the princess's words, Leon was slightly stunned, then instinctively frowned. If the old king had guessed the situation, then why did he still speak of treating the princess well when Joshua ascended? "Wait, seems you've figured it out too." Seeing Leon's dawning realization, Veronica smiled. Then, her eyes slightly reddened, she said self-deprecatingly, "This is how the royal family shows affection. He feared I'd take a harsh hand against Joshua upon ascending, so with his control of the situation, He pretended not to see through it and deliberately said that, although only lip service, given that Joshua could treat me well as his sister upon ascending, naturally, after I ascend, I should also show some compassion. After all, I couldn't be seen as lesser than Joshua, right? So, the old king was playing a trick. Knowing Joshua had lost, he deliberately pretended to be oblivious, using his words to bind Veronica, hoping to spare his son's life. Understanding the old king's intention, Leon finally understood why the princess felt sad, but he didn't know what to say to comfort her, so he stood by the window with her for a while. Soon, a cold hand reached over, grasping Leon's hand, gently shaking it in a pleading manner. Leon. Seeing Leon looking over, the princess, tears glistening in her eyes, softly requested, "Not to trick you, I feel a bit upset now. Could you let me lean on you?" "All right. Thank you." Leaning on Leon's shoulder, facing the cold wind blowing in from outside the window, the princess said mournfully, "Actually, I am not disappointed about father playing tricks on me. I've long since been accustomed to these. What truly saddens me is that even now, he refuses to ask me a single favor." "Ask you?" "Yes, implore me as true family does. Once willfully." She shrunched a bit more into Leon's embrace. Biting her lips, she whispered, "It's not that I want him to beg me lowly for my own satisfaction, but for someone like my father, anything he can utilize, he'd exploit to the utmost. If he thought it useful to beg me, he wouldn't hesitate to do so. The only reason he didn't do it is because he feels this father-daughter bond between us holds no value, is not a good card to play." "Perhaps not necessarily." Seeing the princess's eyes redden more, Leon couldn't help trying to console her. "Your father maybe just doesn't know how you feel about him, believing you don't value him as a father, so he was unwilling to speak up and ask." "That's not it." The princess shook her head, saying, "Although my father doesn't know my feelings towards him, he certainly understands how he perceives me as his daughter, and in such a short time, he can only subconsciously measure my feelings to his by how he feels about me. Since he made this decision in the end, it proves that in his mind, he indeed thinks our father-daughter relationship is worthless, choosing to play tricks and trap me with words rather than pleading emotionally. To me, he's the only family I care about, but to him I am just a stranger. Playing the emotional card is a privilege only between family, and between him and me it's always been about benefits and gains." "Sorry for rambling on about this." With a low sigh, the princess looked through the broken window, watching Joshua, hugging the awakening queen and crying bitterly outside the garden, and said mournfully, "Actually, I am really jealous of Joshua. He's reckless, irritable, arrogant, immature, likes to squander, has many bad habits, but our father indeed loves this son. He also has a mother who loves him very much, and an uncle who forgives him no matter what mistakes he makes. I did everything better than him, handled everything perfectly, had countless people willing to praise me. But since my mother passed, no one ever showed such unconditional favoritism towards me." "Leon." Gently pulling Leon's collar, leaning in his arms, the princess looked up with teary eyes, softly asking, "Would you be that person for me? Am I willing to be that person for you?" Listening to the princess's hopeful inquiry and feeling the atmosphere that had been perfectly set, Leon couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth, feeling as if he had fallen into a trap once again. Although the princess's words were sincere without a trace of falsehood, and even the sole vision of the black ram couldn't find any flaw upon careful reflection, he felt that things were progressing a bit too rapidly. Originally, he just wanted to comfort her slightly because she seemed a bit sad, to chat with her a bit, but as they talked, things suddenly escalated crazily. From the moment she stood by the window, to holding hands, leaning on his shoulder, and then snuggling into his arms before he could even react, they were suddenly hugging each other. While the experience wasn't bad, it did feel a bit like he was, well, like a naive little flower coaxed by an old player, leaving him somewhat panicked. Do you want to calm down a bit?" Glancing at his left hand, which had been pulled and unknowingly wrapped around the princess's waist, Leon awkwardly bluffed, "You're not in a very stable mood right now. and your decisions aren't rational. So maybe you should wait until— I won't wait. After forcing Leon's hand back to her waist, the princess gazed at him stubbornly and said, "You always want to escape from me, and I finally caught you once. If I let you run away this time only to get caught in someone else's net, I'll definitely regret it in the future." "What do you mean by someone else's net? You're not even pretending now, are you?" It's still too sudden. Faced with the queen-level Master Fisher's fierce hook, Leon struggled desperately. Don't make choices on a whim. Matters of love should take more time to get to know each other. See, you admit there's love between us. Also, you said we should get to know each other better, so you better keep your word. I shouldn't have even opened my mouth. Realizing the terrifying level gap between himself and the princess in debating, Leon decisively discarded the topic and argued helplessly. I already called off the engagement before. A verbal cancellation doesn't count. The princess snuggled closer into Leon's embrace, then smiled contently within the comforting warmth and replied, "Such a big matter can't be settled with just a casual remark, right? We should at least notify the elders first. And your father. He's listening to me now, and I don't agree to call off the engagement." The few elders left in the Ryan family, they need to report to me regularly about the military department's affairs. Should I help you ask them? No need. The result of your inquiry would naturally be disagreement, so let's not bother those old folks. Shaking his head speechlessly, Leon tried to remind, "Veronica, you've basically succeeded in your coup now. Even without the support of the Ryan family or a seat in the House of Lords, you can definitely stabilize the situation. So why insist on this engagement?" Hearing Leon's words, the princess blinked her eyes, then gently pinched his side, teasingly saying, "You're so bad. You know what I'll say, yet you still ask. If you must hear it, it's because I think, even without all those extras, I want you to be my prince." Seeing Leon's somewhat puzzled expression, the princess raised her hand to touch his cheek, then pouted slightly, grumbling, "Don't look down on the fact that I'm so eager towards you yet always neglected by you. But those trying to pursue me are at least 100 times more than those pursuing you. No, at least 1,000 times. But what they're after is either my princess status, the wealth I can mobilize, the people I can command, the resources at my disposal, or my beauty. I can see what they want at a glance. But you're the only one who wants nothing, not even expecting anything from me after the engagement. When you're with me, there's no ulterior motive at all. If it were you, what would you choose?" Hearing the princess's words, Leon's cheek couldn't help but twitch slightly. Though the words made sense, the feeling of déjà vu. There's this weird feeling like some old-school overbearing CEO lifting the chin of a sweetie pie with a smug face saying, "Woman, the reason I like you is that you don't care about my money. Of course, the most frustrating thing about you is that you want nothing, not even really wanting me." With a slightly troubled sigh, the princess couldn't help but pinch Leon gently before continuing with a smile. "But I am confident that you'll want it sooner or later, like you just said, more interaction, more nurturing. I'm in no rush. By the way, since we have to interact more, when are you planning to move in?" "Oh? Wait, were we talking about this? How did you steer the conversation here? Also, once you move in, we should consider the wedding." "Stop!" Feeling that if he didn't back out, even the wedding date would be set in a haze, Leon quickly withdrew his hand, nervously saying, "I have things to do. The parliamentarians we arrested earlier still haven't been dealt with, so I'll be leaving first." "Oh!" Looking at Leon, who was driven to a panicked state by her, the princess couldn't help but smile triumphantly, then pouted, pretending to be aggrieved. "Then you must." Wait, you arrested parliamentarians?" "Indeed, we did arrest a few." Seeing the topic finally diverge, Leon couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, admitting openly, "Wasn't Joshua attending the meeting on your behalf? So I followed him to oversee the session." This time the two major proposals in the parliament are crucial, but I'm also a bit worried about your safety here, so I sped things up slightly and arrested some of the more aggressive dissenting parliamentarians. Upon hearing Leon arrested parliamentarians, the princess was initially a bit angry, but when she heard worried about your safety, her heart suddenly melted, erasing any lingering irritation, and she could only say with a helpless glance, "So you didn't have them arrested during the meeting, right?"
No.
Leon shook his head, saying, "I had people ambush outside, and arrested them after they stormed out early because I forcibly passed the proposals. Arresting them after their exit, that's somewhat acceptable." Upon hearing Leon's explanation, the princess breathed a slight sigh of relief, then remarked a bit wearily, "Being provoked to storm out early. Those who more fiercely oppose me and have a violent temper, capable of storming out, should be Marquis Mori, Earl Evans, and Count Pavna." "Did you arrest all three? Marquis Mori, Earl Evans, Count Pavna?" Recalling these three names, Leon vaguely remembered. These were the ones who threw a shoe and knocked out the Minister of Finance, whom he had guards arrest. The one he forced to bow with migratory thrush prince, ending up fainting on his desk, and the one who intended to impeach him, only to be counter-impeached and carried away along with the podium. It seems that although the princess wasn't present, she was well aware of the situation in the bicameral parliament, and these three were indeed the most aggressive dissenting parliamentarians. "No, I didn't arrest those three." Once identifying who these three were, Leon shook his head. "I arrested the other opposing parliamentarians, aside from those three. The rest?" The princess was a bit puzzled upon hearing this, asking, "Meaning who? Parliamentarian Brokash? Parliamentarian Close? Just the rest?" "I know you mean the rest, but there are at least about 60 more dissenting parliamentarians. You didn't apprehend them all, did you?" Commentators News. Outrageous. Numerous members suspected to be kidnapped. The police department accused of serious misconduct. Daily News. Palace attacked. His Majesty frightened and resting. Plans for the princess's early accession. Royal Mail News. Duke of Lionheart loyally saves the day, His Majesty praises. Pillar of the nation, my worthy son-in-law. Corner Alley News. Two major military and political bills simultaneously passed. Upper echelons of the kingdom may face a major reshuffle. The Sun News. Exclusive interview. Finance Minister. I blinked my eyes. Click. The throne was gone. The Sun News. Correction. Coup is a rumor. Former Finance Minister. I was just jealous for a moment. Will publicly apologize soon. After reading the headlines of newspapers accumulated during the few days, he was on a business trip to the dream realm. The red-haired director couldn't help but suspiciously pull open the drawer and glance at the calendar inside. Good heavens, was I really gone for just a week? Not a month? How could so much have happened in these few days? Leon. Slamming the desk hard, the red-haired director squinted and shouted, "About what happened these days? Don't you think you owe me an explanation?" Noticing that the director seemed genuinely a bit angry, Leon, standing at the desk, hesitated for a moment, then tentatively explained. "These past few days should be considered a good thing, right? Director, look, an unknown organization took advantage of your absence to attack the palace intending to slaughter the royal family. This is a serious provocation against you, our Virgo branch, and even the entire cleanup bureau. And I, representing our Virgo branch, arrived just in time, and after a tough battle, not only saved the royal family but also ensured no casualties throughout the process. The royal family even wrote a letter of thanks to the main bureau. Isn't that great? Stop pretending with me." Amused by Leon's answer, the red-haired director lowered his voice, gritting his teeth as he said, "You might fool the main bureau with this, but not me. Who exactly do the remaining abnormal entity holders among the rebels listen to? You know it very well yourself. If you ask me, you damn sure led them to kidnap parliament members first, and then led the group to attack the palace to help the princess seize the throne. As for this so-called unknown organization, either you discovered their plot in advance but didn't report it, Or you knew nothing about their existence and just happened to run into them during your operation. Am I right? Good heavens, and you say you can't read minds? Ahem, no, Director. You really misunderstood. Seeing the anger about to overflow from his own director's pretty fox eyes, Leon couldn't help but blink, then vigorously denied. They're rebels, wanting them to take risks with me, of course, requires negotiation, and their condition was having me help kidnap the parliament members. If you don't believe me, ask them, they truly demanded so. The main issue was the shortage of staff in the bureau at the time, and the situation was incredibly urgent. On one side was the palace being attacked, with the royal family about to be killed, and on the other just kidnapping a few parliament members. I didn't really have a choice, did I? Then how did you know the royal family would have issues? My ability is forced intelligence acquisition, obtained from those influenced by my ability. And how do you explain leading people to attack the palace? No choice, that thing's ability controls those in the kingdom with lower status than herself. Only rebels could avoid being controlled by her. What about the abnormal entity that released the ability? It was silenced by the other side. The remains. Just ashes left. I have them in a can. If the bureau wants to see, they can take it any time. The princess and the old king over there. Fatherly love, filial piety, very good relationship. Any investigator can ask, ensuring the old king genuinely wants to abdicate. Good heavens, you're something else. Having asked all the suspicious points he could think of, only to find them all tightly covered, the red-haired director couldn't help but roll his eyes, then said with a bad mood, "Fine. I'll consider it my misjudgment. When the bureau's investigator comes down, remember to say the same. Otherwise, if you're exposed, don't come to me asking for help." Sure thing. And also, seeing Leon slightly relax after finishing the account, the red-haired director frowned and couldn't help but remind, "Make sure this doesn't happen again. You were purely lucky this time. If you hadn't encountered that abnormal entity, or if it was beyond your ability to handle, what would you do then? If it was unsolvable, I would instantly come back to call for help or find the things you left, Director. I have a double undying body. I could probably still survive. As for if I hadn't encountered the abnormal entity this time." Realizing that his words could deceive the main bureau but not the director, Leon thought for a moment, then admitted frankly, "Then I wouldn't act, would I? It was the rebels kidnapping parliament members and attacking the royal family. What does it have to do with me, a third-level cleaner? Besides, there's no need to worry about them being dealt with afterward either. Once the princess takes power, she certainly won't pursue it, and by regulations in the bureau, criminals who have committed serious offenses can join the cleanup bureau, working off their crimes by clearing abnormal entities. Isn't this a win-win? You sure have thought it through." With a somewhat dissatisfied hum, the red-haired director snorted and said, "What if I report to the upper levels, or if someone in the main bureau insists on thoroughly investigating the abnormal entity holders among the rebels? What will you do then?" That would be an Aquarius conspiracy. Upon hearing the red-haired director's question, Leon, who already had an excuse prepared before acting, immediately replied decisively, "They didn't get their abnormal entities from me. It was all orchestrated by Aquarius Director, so I can't be blamed. Moreover, a few nights ago, Aquarius Director even attacked Prince Joshua's dream, which I managed to fend off, and that has also been reported. By linking these two matters, we have every reason to conclude that Aquarius Director, having regained power, has become increasingly cruel, even planning to target the royal family. Fortunately, Director, you were ahead of the game, sending me to infiltrate the rebels early, gaining the trust of many rebel members and guiding them onto the right path, bringing a number of talents to our bureau. As for the palace attack, that was purely to lure Aquarius Director out, to rid the bureau of a major threat. However, Aquarius Director was too cunning, sensing something was amiss and not taking the bait. Good heavens, if I'm willing to cooperate, this explanation might just barely make sense. And also, seeing the red-haired director seemingly lost in thought, Leon couldn't resist continuing. As for whether the old king's abdication will raise suspicion within the bureau, actually there's no need to worry. After all, he surely won't hold an abdication ceremony anytime soon. He definitely needs time to recuperate, so a coup is out of the question. Moreover, he's been vigorously supporting the princess's reforms for over 6 years. The previous trend was always about the princess's accession. How could it suddenly shift to the prince's accession? Besides, Joshua couldn't handle the king's duties even if he wanted to. There's clearly an issue. Considering the fact that Aquarius Director infiltrated Joshua's dreams, we have reasonable suspicion that Aquarius Director isn't doing this for the first time. The old king might have been influenced by Aquarius Director without realizing it, so we're merely righting the wrongs. It can't be deemed as against the rules. You truly are a talent. Even if the main bureau went insane and forcibly opened the headquarters lockdown, bringing out the abnormal entity capable of reversing time, it might not even convict you. Based on your reasoning, no amount of evidence would matter. If asked, you could just profess your unwavering loyalty, whereas the true intentions behind your actions would only be known to your own internal worm. By the way, Director, seeing the red-haired director's mouth twitch slightly, appearing speechless, Leon cautiously opened his mouth to remind. Not only did we preemptively thwart Aquarius' plot, but we also uncovered a nefarious organization plotting maliciously, completely neutralized a true god-level abnormal entity, ensured the royal family members' safety, and even recruited quite a few talents into the bureau. So no matter how you look at it, we must firmly request commendations from the bureau. You actually have the audacity to request merit recognition? Upon hearing Leon's proposal, the red-haired director felt a wave of toothache. Although Leon's reasoning was nearly flawless and, upon close consideration, he did have the qualifications to request merit recognition, most people would try to keep a low profile after making so many mistakes, hoping not to attract attention. Who would think to request merit recognition? Also, if you remember, just over 2 months ago, when this little rascal had just joined, he was so shy about getting an extra duty allowance, acting all embarrassed about benefiting from the bureau. I even had to personally teach him how to reasonably tap into the bureau's funds. And now, not even 3 months later, he's seamlessly become a standard smooth operator, even capable of high-level maneuvers like turning a funeral into a celebration. Where on earth did he learn this from? Director. After not seeing the red-haired director respond, Leon blinked, figuring she might be grappling with her inner feelings, and tentatively tried to persuade her. This incident was beneficial to the kingdom. The royal family ensured their safety. The princess got the opportunity to showcase her talents. The kingdom gained a wise king, and ordinary people obtained a more hopeful future. As for the cleanup bureau, we averted a crisis without causing casualties. We uncovered a conspiracy, helping to maintain stability, and simultaneously displayed great prowess, deterring potential wrongdoers. Whichever way you look at it, it's a win-win situation. Since so many people benefited and gained a better future, the minor roughness in the operation really isn't a problem. This is called keeping things separate, and it was you who taught me that. Oh, it turns out I taught him that, so never mind then. All right. Rolling her eyes, the red-haired director looked at the slick Leon, feeling somewhat speechless. Then go back and complete the paperwork, and once you've finished, I'll submit it for you to request merit recognition. Thank you, Director. Realizing that he had completely passed this hurdle, Leon couldn't help but smile. Then he pulled out a folder and handed it over. I've already prepared the materials. Could you help check them? Seeing the merit recognition materials on her desk, the red-haired director's lips couldn't help but twitch. Really? I had just made the decision, and you can pull this out directly? Did you prepare a bit too thoroughly? And these two are reimbursement requests. The blue cover is for the kingdom, the purple cover is for the bureau. With the red-haired director looking a bit dumbfounded, Leon pulled out 2 more documents and said with a serious face, "In the defense of the royal palace, not only did I lose a precious abnormal artifact, but those 500 or so enthusiastic citizens who participated in the operation also prepared for several days. They not only funded weapons themselves but also pooled resources to buy trucks to block roads, dug up roadbeds overnight, and monitored the palace conditions. In short, it was a really tough few days. Moreover, those people aren't financially well off. Many don't have proper jobs. Their economic situation is not great, so I thought the kingdom should at least reimburse them a bit to avoid them taking a loss. While what you said isn't exactly wrong, but asking the kingdom to reimburse you for the costs of your rebellion? Can you be any more outrageous? After taking the 2 reimbursement files, the red-haired director couldn't help but ask. I can help you submit it, but I have no control over the kingdom's side. I can't guarantee it will pass. No worries. I've already discussed it with the princess. As long as you submit it, it'll definitely go through. Alright, that part too. Casually putting away the reimbursement documents, the red-haired director couldn't help but curiously ask. You have a marriage agreement with the princess. It shouldn't be hard to meet her in person. Why not submit it yourself? Upon hearing the red-haired director's question, it was Leon's turn to twitch his lips. Sure, I could submit them, but ever since the princess shrugged off the suppression over her head, she seems to have become even more uninhibited. As for me, well, having just stormed the palace after all, it's better to avoid seeing her too much for now to dodge suspicion. Oh, director! Spinning a reason he couldn't even believe himself. Leon barely managed to muddle through, then proactively steered the conversation, his expression tinged with curiosity. Did you gain anything from your trip to the dream realm? Indeed I did. Although she knew Leon was clearly dodging the issue, the red-haired director couldn't help but smile with pride upon hearing his question. The gains were substantial. Sounds like there's good news? Hearing this, Leon raised an eyebrow, somewhat excitedly asking, Did you find where Aquarius's physical form is sleeping in the dream realm? Not quite. The smile on the red-haired director's face slightly faded, and after a slight cough, she said, But I did capture his most loyal subordinate, so it wasn't a wasted trip. Oh, and you know her. It's that female reporter named Nicole. Nicole? Upon hearing this familiar name, Leon pondered for a moment, then his eyes slightly lit up. I recall the black goat's tail is with her? Since you caught her, doesn't that mean? Exactly, just as you thought, the red-haired director said with a playful smile. Congratulations, with this tail, plus the horn, heart, and stomach from before, you've already assembled 4/7 of the goat's components. Soon you can awaken this near-god-level demon. Yes. Hearing this, Leon nodded a bit excitedly, realizing that what once seemed unattainable, the 7 goat components, had come together so quickly that now thinking about it, doesn't seem that impressive? Reviewing what he owned, the joy on Leon's face slightly diminished. For a rookie like him, the goat component suite was obviously excellent, but compared to things like the Unfair Snake Pact, Hand of Screams, Lust Dream Invader, which worked even on deities, the 7 goat components set exhausting only 60 points of contamination value seemed somewhat paltry. Although the abilities like Endless Blood Battle, Arouse Wrath, Domination Substitute Death were practical, the goat components themselves were merely near god level, and Goat Whip had exploded before, uncertain if it was fixed, making its potential appear limited. Glancing at Leon's expression, the red-haired director blinked her foxy eyes with a hint of amusement. What? Now that you have better abnormal artifacts, the silly goat doesn't meet your standards anymore. No worries, it's perfectly normal to feel that way. Seeing Leon appearing a bit bashful, the red-haired director crossed her legs, then said with a playful smile, Back then I was much like you. After acquiring the Slaughter Blood Hair, I realized most of my anomaly artifacts weren't as powerful. Moreover, the effects of Slaughter Blood Hair are quite comprehensive. Perception, defense, confinement, destruction. Every issue I encountered, none were unsolvable with it, and over time I grew accustomed to relying on it for solutions. Thanks to Slaughter Blood Hair's unparalleled destructive power, any entity with a physical body was no match for me. Within the cleanup bureau, aside from the director who could command Sunshadao, and Ares board member who mastered destruction's secret technique, no third person dared claim to have a guaranteed victory against me. Pausing briefly here, the red-haired director then earnestly stated, But my most important anomaly artifact is actually… Never mind. It's kind of complicated to explain. You should just come over and touch it yourself instead. At this point, the red-haired director sitting in the chair stood up, propping both hands on the table and leaning toward Leon, then opened her mouth. Ah! Ah! Looking at the tender red tip of the tongue exposed between the two rows of pearly white teeth, Leon momentarily felt a little dumbfounded. According to logic, shouldn't you explain your journey and use your experience to tell me that there are no useless abnormal objects, only useless cleaners, so I shouldn't look down on the black goat? Why did you inexplicably open your mouth? Naya! Flower god, what the? You mean, you want me to reach in and touch it? So that's it. Finally understanding, Leon nodded and then, according to the red-haired director's request, extended his finger and lightly tapped the tip of her tongue, which was as lively as a little snake and as tender as chive leaves. However, nothing happened. Question mark. What are you randomly poking at? I want you to feel my teeth. Receiving Leon's puzzled look, the red-haired director rolled her eyes impatiently, then gently tilted her head and voluntarily bit Leon's finger that had reached into her mouth. SSS. In the familiar noise, a string of information popped up one after another, unfurling before Leon's eyes. Name, second guard year, protection, activation, concealment, appearance. A white hard incisor with a glossy and bright enamel. Not only has it not been decayed, but no trace of wear is found. Abilities, flesh and blood protection, temporary enhancement, anomaly disturbance immunity. Cost, completely lose the original tooth, both the flesh body and the soul, permanently retaining the corresponding defect. File, to ensure the safety of anomaly number 004 12 ant nests. The director of Taurus, on her own initiative, prepared to gather the secret techniques of Taurus, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Sagittarius palaces, to collectively create a set of defensive anomaly objects. This set of anomaly objects is based on the Aquarius Palace's Anomaly Creation Secret Technique, strengthened by the Sagittarius Palace Anomaly Reinforcement Secret Technique for defense effects. The Capricorn Palace Anomaly Concealment Secret Technique adds the disturbance immunity trait, and was finally completed through the Taurus Palace Anomaly Forge Secret Technique. After 32 days of effort, the four directors ultimately created 32 defensive anomaly objects, named 32-year, held by the Cleanup Bureau's Virgo Division Chief Olivia, and it continues to this day. Note, this anomaly object is one of the 8 flesh guards of the 32-year, specifically guarding the body as the second guard. Evaluation. An extremely tough defensive anomaly object, though the effect is very singular, after targeted reinforcement by the Sagittarius secret technique. In a normal state, it is enough to resist the majority of physical attacks. If activated, while the consumption increases significantly, the protection effect will drastically increase under the Sagittarius secret technique, and due to the Capricorn secret technique's immunity effect. The protection effect of this anomaly object is almost impossible to be weakened by other anomalies. Contamination value, 3.2, inactive. Whole set, -32, activated. Whole set. Name, 6th Knowledge Guard Year, protection, activation, concealment. Appearance, a white hard incisor. Abilities, cognitive enhancement. Contamination value. Name, 10th Soul Awakening Guard Year, protection, activation, concealment. Appearance, a white hard canine. Abilities, soul revival. Contamination value. What the? Seeing the anomaly information popping up like a barrage, Leon couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock, touching the red-haired director's molar in disbelief. All 32 of your teeth are defensive anomaly objects. Heh, how about that? Surprised? Very satisfied with Leon's shocked expression, the red-haired director raised her eyebrows and said, Vala. TSK, fingers are still in there. Tui. Letting go of the teeth and tilting her head back, spitting out Leon's finger, the red-haired director took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her mouth, then said with a smiling face, This set of items, although not numbered, is not any worse than anomalies numbered under 30. In terms of protection capability alone, it can even easily be in the top 3. At that time, to craft this set of items, not only was the expenditure in the Bureau enormous, but I almost handed over all the anomalies I had saved in the past. Yet, the resulting protection level is unparalleled. With the 32-year fully activated, I almost have no weaknesses. Even a 4-pillar god with a 70-point Leon value wouldn't be able to topple me with sneak attacks. It would be forced to endure, slaughter Bloodhair, S attacks, and go head-to-head with me until I exhaust myself. The system's evaluation is spot on. Your set of anomaly objects is genuinely extraordinarily tough. Recalling the protection effects he touched, and thinking about the scene when those true gods faced his director, Leon couldn't help but hiss, feeling a sense of despair for them. This so-called 32-year defensive anomaly object is like 32 incredibly solid pieces of armor. Add in the director's almost 70-point contamination value, and defensively, the director is practically an iron fortress, an impregnable gate. Leon, unaware of her definition, swaying between amphibians and metallic types, the red-haired director looked at Leon's thoughtful expression and gently reminded him, "I'm telling you all this because I want you to know that although the status of an anomaly is important, the most crucial things are its capabilities and features. As long as you have enough strength and a high Leon value, even lower-tier anomaly objects can play a significant role in true god-level battles. Just like my 32-year, although each individual piece has a low Leon value, altogether it only amounts to 32 points, but in my hands it can be tough enough to give all true gods a headache. Similarly, although that stupid sheep is only near god level, its 7 parts each embody an original sin, and its abilities are very outstanding. If used well, it's honestly not bad, which is why I kept that stupid sheep by my side before. Leon, when you someday have a 60-point Leon value, these 7 pieces of that stupid sheep could also play a 32-year level of effect, so if they can be collected, they should be collected as much as possible." I understand now. Although the red-haired director spoke somewhat tactfully, Leon still understood the underlying message. It's not about the sheep being useless, but about the person being unable. Although the battle record is quite impressive, my current contamination value is really too low, and the opponents I face are too fierce, so the sheep parts, despite their excellent abilities, can't affect the target, failing to showcase their effects. While anomalies like Unfair Snake Pact and Hand of Screams, due to their materials being of true god level, can compulsorily affect true god level targets with their high status, it doesn't mean they are necessarily more useful than the sheep set. At least, I am not yet in a position to dismiss them. Seems like I've been having it too good recently. I seem to have gotten a bit carried away. After repeatedly admonishing myself internally to maintain my mindset, avoid arrogance, and stay impetuous, Leon took a deep breath and sincerely thanked. "Thank you, Director. I will definitely keep these words in mind. By the way, where's the sheep's tail now?" "Still on that female reporter." Pointing to the storage room diagonally opposite her office, used for storing wine, the red-haired director said with a smile, "I'm only good at killing demons, not making them listen to me. If you want to obtain that anomaly object, you'll have to negotiate with her but yourself."